Рано вранці поводу Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Вийшла дівчинонька, рано вранці воду брать, за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Розпрягайте, хлопці, коні, дай лягайте спочивать, дай я вийду сам зелений, сам дівчинку капель. Раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, в саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, в саду ягоди рвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Future
Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1051 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very, very big news. Ukraine destroyed a massive Russian assault force today in Kursk, and it was absolute carnage in Kursk. And also, the Russian ships are being blocked from rescuing troops inside of Syria right now, and there's still a massive fire near Russia's Ingles air base. And we have a ton of news to cover today, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from the war in Ukraine, as well as some news from around the world, as we've actually been able to hear of significant news involving the Russian alliance sphere over the past 24 hours, not only inside the area of the Russian Federation and the state of Ukraine, but also within the Middle East as well. But we have absolutely major pieces of news to cover tonight, as we were able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces were able to conduct a very successful defense of the Suja area today, inflicting a major loss of approximately an entire Russian company in less than 20 minutes during a failed attack near to the direction of Malaya Lagnia by the 78th Mechanized Brigade. It appears that the Russian Federation is not able to continue their attempted offensive towards the Ukrainians, and while the North Koreans and the Russians are trying everything they can to be able to try and break through the Ukrainian lines in Suja, this is simply not the case and will not be happening. This also comes at the exact same time as we were able to get breaking news from the United States intelligence sources that they have estimated that 4,000 North Koreans at this point have been wounded and killed in the fighting in the Kursk Oblast, meaning that currently the North Koreans have a 30% attrition rate in less than 1 month of combat, an insanely high attrition rate that beats any Russian attrition rates that have been seen so far during the entirety of the war, including the Battle of Bakhmut and the Battle of Avdiivka. We are also beginning to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces were able to conduct an offensive initiative near to the area of Makhnovka to the south of Suja, and were able to reclaim the village just yesterday. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear of a major Ukrainian attack that has occurred deep inside of Russian Federation territory, as massive explosions are beginning to rock the Russian Federation from its direct interior into its periphery near to the Ukrainian Ukrainian border. We have been able to hear that a Ukrainian strike has hit the Voronezh area, although at this moment the exact damage and the exact building that has been hit is relatively unknown. However, there is something to be said about the fire at Ingles, as we were able to hear that a Ukrainian strike successfully hit a major fuel depot inside the area of Ingles, destroying a major fuel reserve for the Russian strategic bomber fleet that requires a very specific grade of aviation jet fuel to be able to operate. With the loss of that facility, it does appear that the Russian Federation will no longer be able to fly strategic bomber missions as regularly as they have been in the past, greatly decreasing the attacks against the state of Ukraine and once again benefiting Ukraine's defensive position. Meanwhile, outside...
And they can't even put the fire out, unfortunately. That's the crazy thing as well. The fire's been raging for over a day now, and that fire's just gotten worse, and they can't put it out. So it's just crazy. It's blazing the whole place up near Ingles.
It is absolutely crazy. It is causing significant damage right now around the Ingles area, and it does appear that the entire fuel depot is going to most likely go up as it's still on fire for a second day in a row. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians were also able to conduct a shocking deep strike near to the area of Kursk, which is directly behind to the east of the city of Donetsk, and they have apparently hit the Russian 8th Army Guards Combined Arms Army headquarters, commanding an entire army of the Russian Federation. This army is involved in the defense of the Pokrovsk front, or more so the offensive at the Pokrovsk front, and it does appear that there has been significant command faults or command collapses today, as we have actually gotten no news today of Russian battle activities on the Pokrovsk front at all, possibly showing that that attack has actually caused significant damage to Russian command and control abilities within this area of the front. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear of major successful defensive news throughout most areas, although the Kupiansk front is being reported as a somewhat difficult one right now by Ukrainian commanders. Nevertheless, we also were able to get big news outside of Ukraine, as we did hear that NATO is going to be deploying a fleet of 10 warships into the area of the Baltic Sea to be able to protect vital comms links and communication cables at the bottom of the sea, and we were also able to hear that the Russian Federation is not able to retrieve any of their abandoned equipment inside of Syria, as it appears that their vessels are not allowed to enter the port of Taradis under the Syrian interim government's command. We have loads of news to cover today, and of course we do want to make a quick mention for many people who were here last night that we are still paying attention and watching the news that is going on in Los Angeles. We will most likely not be including any of that news in tonight's stream. We do not have any of it on our map, as y'all can see over here, but of course we are once again wanting to say to all of our viewers who are from the area of Los Angeles that we are wishing you all the best, and we hope that things are going well, although it does sound as though the situation is continuing to deteriorate while we are on air right now. But moving on from that and on into our major news of the night, we were able to hear that Ukrainian forces were able to conduct a shocking defense of the area of Kursk as a Russian assault group attempted to push towards the direction, I'll make sure to move these towards the accurate direction, from Kremenyo and towards Malaya Luknia, and from what we saw, the Russian assault was completely destroyed in a matter of less than about 20 to 30 minutes. And this video is about 2 minutes and 20 seconds long, but it's a very condensed version of the actions that the Ukrainians took in this area. The actual battle lasted for approximately 20 minutes to about a half hour, but during the course of that half hour, an entire company, an assaulting company of the Russian Federation, was destroyed. Seeing such a significant loss like this in such a focal moment as less than an hour and a half is a very shocking thing. It's actually incredibly rare, because while we usually hear that the Russians are losing over 1,000 troops per day, that's over a 24-hour period over a front line that's several hundred miles long, meaning that when we speak about the losses in any one particular area, they're usually exceptionally low. But in this particular instance, shockingly enough, the losses were incredibly high, insanely high. We are assuming that at least 60 to 70 Russians will be reported as casualties from this company-sized unit, which is approximately about 100 troops, and all of their vehicles and equipment were lost, and that was in a span of less than half an hour. Meaning, if we were to put that into perspective, around 10% of all Russian losses today, really around 8% of all Russian losses today, were seen in the confines of this one video in just 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So here's the clip. And we can see the Russian assault company moving forward through the fields. This is somewhere around the area of Malaya Luknia. We can now see some Russians moving into the trees, and we can see the assault group continuing to advance through the fields and trying to make their way towards the Ukrainian defending forces on the other side. We can see the company
Just
continuing.
moving through like ducks too, just in a big line. Not a smart idea because they're about to get pummeled.
And it is a horrendous idea as the FPV drones immediately come in and start to make quick work of this assaulting Russian company. We can see another FPV drone coming in and getting a hit on a lighter armored vehicle. It looked to be an APC. We can also see another one getting a hit on a BMD-4, it appeared. We can also see another one striking at the underside of the carriage of a BTR armored personnel carrier. We can now see one Russian vehicle running out of control into the trees, it seems.
Just going out of control, man. Literally straight through the trees. Look at it. It got hit.
And now we can see that it was hit, and apparently it's now caught on fire. Assuming that the vehicle would be under control if the crew was coherent, we are assuming that the crew was actually killed possibly by some sort of an overpressure when the FPV drone hit the tank, and that's why it then ran into the tree line out of control, careened into this crater, and then started to catch on fire. It may have been a double tap that caused the tank to catch on fire and detonate the ammunition storage, because up until that point, we didn't have any proof that there was an ongoing fire in the crew compartment that would have killed the crew. The pressure from that, if the ammunition had cooked off in that way, would have been significant enough. It would have popped the hatches open, and we actually would have seen the fire erupting out of the commander and gunner's hatch at a minimum if an ammunition fire had already started in the vehicle when it was running into the tree line. So a pretty significant thing to see. We can also see here another FPV drone hitting some Russian forces as they were dismounting their APC. We can now see other FPV drones making swift work of the Russians on the ground here, dropping bomblets directly onto them as they're trying to hide within the tree line, the offensive already largely falling apart at this point, and we can see that the FPV drones using bomblets are already starting to accumulate a large number of Russian casualties. A very significant amount, as a matter of fact. We do assume that most of the company, 2/3 of them at least, were killed and wounded over the course of this action. We can see another Russian armored personnel carrier burning in the middle of the field, stricken by an FPV drone before it could even dismount the infantry. We can see more armored personnel carriers still trying to make the ill-fated advance at this point, as the FPV drones continue to stalk them down and pretty much hunt each and every single one of them down, no matter if they're making it to the tree line or not. We can now see this.
I wonder how Russia got hit this hard, because like this is some crazy losses. Like we've seen the Russians get smacked really hard before, but this is like new levels of getting hit today. They took a lot of losses in one spot.
I mean, this is a very significant amount of losses here, and we can see another FPV drone getting hit, and it appears that most of the casualties that the Russians took in this assault were all taken by FPV drones, and it still appears that the Russians have not really found a way to be able to combat Ukrainian FPV drones like the Ukrainians have been able to combat Russian ones. As far as we understand, the electronic warfare despair— oh my lord, that tank just actually had a turret toss. But the electronic warfare disparity in between the Ukrainian armed forces and the Russian armed forces is incredibly significant. The Ukrainians have a decent amount of effective electronic warfare systems that they are able to field on a tactical level, not a strategic level, and this has made it incredibly difficult for the Russian Federation to use FPV drones to the same severity that the Ukrainians use FPV drones on the Russians. On the flip side, the Russians appear to have almost no electronic warfare abilities on a tactical battlefield level. They do have them on the strategic level, but not on the tactical level to be able to stop these FPV drones from causing serious damage. And that's why we've seen that over the course of the war, there's been now, at this point, two different developmental paths that the Ukrainians and the Russians have taken. The Ukrainians more so emphasize cheaper, inexpensive drones that carry a decent amount of explosives and have an armor-penetrating ability to be able to destroy armored vehicles such as these with very great efficiency and, of course, a very low cost, which is a great thing for Ukraine in the long-term picture. The Russians, on the other hand, have started to develop recently these drones that are actually connected directly by wire. So the drones are technically wire-guided, but this is the only way that the Russians have been able to make it around Ukrainian electronic warfare abilities on the tactical level. And while we do see that those drones are pretty much 100% effective, a lot like the Ukrainians, the Russians are not able to field them in incredibly large numbers at this point, as it does appear that those drones may be more expensive or more challenging for the Russians to produce compared to the cheap, inexpensive Ukrainian FPV drones that we're seeing used here in this clip that literally wiped out an entire company-sized unit in just less than 20 minutes. And we can see that they're still wiping out the remaining armor support, and we can also see here in the final parts of the video the high casualties that were taken in the tree lines. It's still a very crazy thing to see, these kinds of losses being taken. And we were able to see that later on in the day, a Russian soldier was driving through an area close to the battlefield, and we could already see that apparently this company was taking losses before the Ukrainians even started to show us film. This is from an area we're believing that is a couple of miles away to the west, maybe a mile or two away, and it looks as though there was already a significant amount of losses that had been taken in this area as well. We can see a couple of we can actually see a destroyed main battle tank and what appears to be a recovery vehicle in the background. We see another
carnage everywhere. It's just crazy. It's just like a graveyard of military vehicles at this point, right along this road.
It is absolutely insane.
It also looks like a hellscape outside the vehicles too. Like it's just it's rough looking around there.
Yeah, it is horrendous. I'll say that for sure. But that's seen in that clip, still showing some of the significant losses that the Russians have taken in the Kursk Oblast. And that is not even to mention the losses that the North Koreans have taken so far since being in the Kursk Oblast. The North Koreans are a very interesting group, a very interesting fighting force, that is. Considering that they have really no practical battlefield experience over the entirety of their military history outside of the Korean War from 1950 to 1953, the Korean People's Army, deployed by the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, is a relatively new force to the field, practically having really no understanding of modern battlefield tactics or even modern warfighting technology. They're practically the equivalent of Stone Age cavemen coming forward into the modern world and seeing what modern warfare brings. And according to what we've heard from U.S. intelligence, and I once again want to remind people that this is something that is pretty shocking in number. North Korea has already lost 4,000 soldiers wounded and killed in the war against Ukraine, and that's specifically inside of the Kursk Oblast. That's according to Zelensky, and that was further corroborated today by U.S. intelligence as well, that the number is roughly 4,000 wounded and killed. Going off of a normal metric or a normal ratio of wounded to killed, it probably means that around 1,000 to 1,200 North Koreans have been killed, and the remainder of that number are wounded. This is an incredibly high number. This is a 30% attrition rate. Out of the 12,000 soldiers that were sent in the North Korean, we are understanding it's somewhere around a regiment-sized unit by the North Korean metrics, or a brigade-sized unit possibly. This is still, yes, it is, I believe, a brigade-sized unit. These losses are wildly high, insanely high, as a matter of fact. This is something that we've never seen before, at least according to the numbers. And what's crazy is that they're making such a small impact on the battlefield, they hardly even really register. But beyond that, though, 30% attrition in 1 month is horrendous. The Russians have been taking record losses as far as modern war is concerned in the war in Ukraine, and at no point in the war has their attrition rate reached 30% for any single unit. We have seen in the past that the number is reached, from what we've assumed, somewhere around 20 to 23%, but it's never reached 30%. That's actually a 30% increase on the highest attrition rates that we've ever seen in a single Russian unit over the course of the war. And it's certainly showing us at this point, without a shadow of a doubt, the Korean People's Army is so far behind the curve, it will take them a very long time to be able to acclimate to the realities of modern war, or they may never really be able to. But that's something that we're actually going to get into here in a little bit. I'm actually going to talk about that here after we ask this question, y'all. But still, Ukraine severely destroyed a Russian assault force today near Malaya Lechnia, which we just saw on film. And a lot of people are wondering what led to this catastrophic failure. And some people have had some different ideas. Some people have said that Russia got sneak attacked, pretty much ambushed by Ukrainian forces as they were moving through this field. Some others are saying that the Russians are just purely incompetent, had a poor battle plan, and then those losses resulted as a cause of that. Some others are saying that Ukraine amassed a large defensive force in that area, and that's what led to the significant losses of the Russian attacking force in that video. And some others are saying that they're a little bit unsure and undecided at the moment, but they still want to weigh in, and that's something that is very commendable in itself. But beyond that, Matthew, what are people really thinking about this, and what are you thinking as well about the Russian attack that literally got obliterated today?
All right, so we saw insanely high losses. We saw the Russians try to attack the Ukrainians, and it looks like the Ukrainians defended themselves extremely well because they wiped out almost the entire Russian assault force, all the vehicles and the troops that were coming after them. So we saw that crazy footage a moment ago. So what led to this catastrophic failure? Because that was a failure on the Russians' part of a very large magnitude. So 56% said Russia is simply incompetent, while 31% said Russia got sneak ambushed by Ukraine, and 7% said Ukraine amassed a very large defense force and they simply outnumbered the Russians. And on this one, I honestly couldn't really tell you. Like, it seemed like an ambush, but at the same time, they were going through the middle of an open field. So, maybe it was an ambush, but I'm kind of leaning toward the fact that maybe the Russians are just so incompetent, they literally rolled straight up into the Ukrainians' area and they just got smashed, like, of magnitudes we've never seen before. So, as Activista pointed out in the live chat, she asked, is this the handiwork of the big general snap strategist that Putin just sent to the area? And you might remember Putin just sent his quote-unquote best general to Kursk to ensure that they can defend the territory properly, and that is who's currently in charge right now in Kursk. And he's apparently one that made that massive blunder that led to this massive loss today. So he's not doing too good there in Kursk, at least in this one attack right here. So I'm with the 56%. I think they're incompetent. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to go with the 56%. It does appear that the Russian Federation is taking extreme losses, largely due to battlefield incompetence from what we can understand. This attack was poorly implemented. As we saw in the video, it didn't really appear that the Russian Federation was able to support this attacking column with any kind of artillery fire, or for that matter, were able to create a viable strategy to be able to overwhelm the Ukrainians with superior firepower and then advance the attacking column. Usually in the United States military doctrine, we usually like to overwhelm enemy forces with superior firepower. That's usually done, interestingly enough, by the U.S. Air Force. And the U.S. Air Force is competent enough and well-armed enough that we can actually deal with most of the surface-to-air threats that would be seen on the battlefield that is currently stopping the Russians and the Ukrainians from being able to leverage their air power. The Russian Federation really has no way to deal with Ukrainian air defense systems, and so for this reason, anywhere really even dozens of miles away from the front line, it's completely impossible to use any modern kind of guided air-to-ground weaponry, because no aircraft are able to maintain the needed altitude to be able to drop and operate those weaponry without being shot down by some sort of a surface-to-air defense system on either side. The U.S. Air Force would be able to deal with that issue in the middle of it actually trying to secure this front line. Once the United States is able to achieve a air supremacy within the area, meaning that we control the skies entirely, or even if it was a contested skies, we would still be able to press forward with air-to-ground operations in a limited role, and if we had complete air superiority, we would be able to push forward full-scale air operations in support of the attacking force. We would bombard, and this is of course in the perspective of if the Russians actually had the proper amount of resources, the United States would bombard the front lines significantly with air-to-ground munitions before the U.S. Army even opened up with artillery. Once the Air Force was able to clear out a decent amount of the significant large-scale threats on that front line, the United States Army would then engage with artillery. And once the enemy had been thoroughly decimated by the Air Force and then the U.S. Army's artillery, then and only then would the actual Army assault column move forward onto that front line, clear out the area, and take the ground. Our doctrine revolves entirely around superior firepower, and that really is the only way to succeed in a modern war, is to be able to actually achieve some sort of superior firepower, and the United States' main way of doing that is initially achieving air supremacy. The Russians cannot do any of that. The Russian Federation cannot achieve air supremacy simply for the fact that they lack a large number of anti-radiation missiles, or as we would call them, an AGM-88 HARM here in the United States. Other countries have different variants, but for the United States, it's called the HARM. They do not have the requisite amount of missiles for those kinds of missions. Neither do they really have the abilities to actually operate them. Most aircraft are really not able to operate those kinds of missiles in the Russian Air Force. The second thing is that the Russian Federation, while supposedly firing about 50,000 shells per day, is unable to allocate the proper amount of munitions for single frontline offensives like this. And that is once again showing a major failing in the Russian logistics corps, as you would think if the Russians were planning a major offensive push involving an entire company in an assaulting column, that they would allocate some form of artillery support to suppress Ukrainian forces before they were able to make it to the front line. The Russians did not do that. And considering that the Ukrainians were not suppressed, that they were literally watching the Russians advance onto their position situation in the wide open, they were able to call back to their forces, and they were able to effect a proper frontline defense in the form of fire support for their infantry that are on the ground. So the Ukrainians were able to call in their version of fire support. And while the Ukrainians are always getting outgunned in terms of shells fired per day by the Russians, one category that they're never getting outgunned in anytime soon is the FPV drone category. And the Ukrainians were able to call forward their FPV drone artillery groups, if you want to call them that were able to fly out the FPV drones into that area and were able to start precision striking the Russian tanks, the armor that's providing the support to the softer APCs of that column. And once most of the main armor had been knocked out and the APCs were on their own, they then went to picking off the APCs while they were still trying to make their way to the tree line. And the few APCs that made it to the trees still got knocked out, and then they went after the troops one by one, dropping bomblets onto them and then damaging those forces further, pretty much completely destroying the attacking column over time without the Ukrainian infantry really even engaging these soldiers directly. And that's the big thing, is that in a modern war, in really any war since World War I, the number one rule is that the infantry are really the last line of defense on the battlefield. You usually want to be able to defeat the enemy armed force through superior firepower alone, and the Ukrainians were able to do that in this battle. The Russians leveraged no superior firepower against the Ukrainians to be able to suppress them, and that's why this offensive turned into a complete failure. So given that deep analysis, this was completely a failure because of Russian incompetence, because they did not allocate enough munitions, or explosives for that matter, to be able to suppress the Ukrainians to turn this into a successful offensive. So that is why they failed, and it is entirely, without a doubt, a complete failure of the Russians and a major showing of incompetence. But with that, we are going to be moving on into a little bit more news about the North Koreans, because 4,000 North Koreans killed is a significant number. That is a 30% attrition rate, and attrition rates like that are not really seen anywhere. I believe in the United States Army and Afghanistan, attrition rates were generally in the single digits. I don't believe they ever got above, I don't even think they got above 3% most of the time on any given month, or even during an entire deployment. And so it is shocking to hear that the North Koreans are taking a 30% attrition rate in 1 month. And that means, going off of that average metric, the North Koreans are going to suffer a near 100% attrition rate of an entire brigade-sized unit in about the course of 3 months. So they're going to have a brand new brigade come in and then literally attrit them entirely, and then bring a new one in every 4 times a year. That is an insane amount of losses that the North Koreans are taking. The reason why that is happening is because they have no practical combat experience in the modern battlefield. Also, to just skip past that whole analysis, because I think many of y'all just know that we've already seen them on the field, they perform poorly. But many people are saying, and someone actually tried to say this the other day on another show out there somewhere, I forgot where it was, but I heard this, the United States is playing a risky blunder. They're allowing their enemies, the North Koreans, to join the war in Ukraine and get out there and learn what the wars look like, so that way they can adapt and evolve. The problem with that is that the North Koreans do not have an ability to adapt or evolve. North Korea lacks any kind of advanced industries that deal with computers or microprocessors, so industrially, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is stagnated in 1970s era technology. Anything that requires even an analog computer is beyond their means. North Korea just simply does not have the abilities to produce any kind of computers outside of their country. They can import those computer systems from the People's Republic of China, but that is a very slow and laborious process. And not only that, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is highly short of cash, hard cash, that they could use to trade with the People's Republic of China. If they wanted to buy large enough numbers of computer processors, computer chips, and such things to be able to equip the entire KPA, which is about 1.1 million strong, they would literally have to bankrupt the country and completely stop buying food imports from the Chinese to be able to make that possible. So everyone would starve to death, and they would finally have the drones, but they wouldn't have anyone to operate them because most people would be starving at that point. So that's why you hear the North Koreans talking about those expensive Dell computers, because they literally cannot afford the Dell computers, otherwise they will not have food to eat. Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy thing when you think about it. There's no way for them to truly adapt. Now, they can adapt for the victory parades that they have in the capital, really the parades that they have like 4 times a year at this point. They can update to look modern for that parade, but your average rank and file Korean People's Army divisions, which are your basic fighting element, which is crazy because that's an insane size to have at a basic fighting element, or the regiments even, they just will never be able to equip all of them with that kind of tech. So they're completely behind the game, good and for all. There's just no way, even industrially, that they can move forward. And that was something that I was actually wanting to look into a little bit more. And Matthew, you know that I've been getting a lot of books recently. I'm actually going to be reading a book here in a little bit, just to let y'all know, on the South Korean economy from the 1960s to the 1980s and then beyond. It's actually a very interesting book. I picked it out specifically because South Korea and North Korea developmentally were actually pretty much on the same track up until the late 1970s, and North Korea was actually more economically successful than South Korea until the end of the 1970s. And it's a really important thing to note how smaller countries like South Korea, which is crazily enough, y'all wouldn't believe it, historically it's very similar to North Korea in almost every single way up until the late 1970s. They were able to move out of being a poverty-stricken country and into one of the most wealthiest countries in the world for their size. North Korea then went into being poverty-ridden and worse off than they were even in the 70s. So by understanding the economic miracles and successes of South Korea, you can really understand where the North Koreans went wrong to where they're in a position like they are today, where they cannot even advance their military technology on a massive scale for the enlisted soldiers of the KPA without going bankrupt, because they literally just don't have the economy nor the cash to be able to buy that kind of stuff to innovate the entire military in that way. That is the craziest thing about this, and that's also why, in another nutshell, the North Koreans are even in Russia. Like, if they had money to spend, the North Koreans would not have sent an expeditionary force to Russia. These people are not there to really learn how modern war works per se, because even if they learned, there really is no way for them to take that knowledge and then run with it and innovate the military because they don't have the money. So what they're really there for is to pretty much be used as currency. The North Koreans send North Koreans into Russia to pretty much just get shot. The Russians give them something in exchange. That's the entire shtick as it exists right now, and that is a pretty sad one when you think about it, because that's really the only way that North Korea can innovate at all. It's pretty much just selling off their people and letting them get killed in droves in the Kursk Oblast. But moving on from that, that is generally why, in a major picture, the North Koreans will never be able to really innovate their army, even with the lessons they are going to learn in the Kursk Oblast. But moving on from that and into the rest of the news that we got from today in the Kursk Oblast, we were able to see the Chimera unit in the Kursk Oblast continuing to hit Russian vehicles. We believe that these are a part of the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade. And we can see them slamming another one right here, another BMD. And we see them hitting another one. Oh!
Slamming it. Their men were up on that post, their tiny post, getting pounded.
Ivan and his men were up on their tiny post, and they were getting pounded. Well, I thought it was a good I thought it was a good joke. But we can see them.
That was good. There's just not much to say.
Man, there wasn't much to say at all, man. There really wasn't. But the silence was deafening. I was like, damn, man. But anyways, we also got to see the 17th Heavy Mechanized Brigade firing at Russian positions in the Kursk Oblast as well, near to the direction of Bolshoi-Solotskoye. We've rarely actually seen this brigade in action. It's a fairly new one to the Kursk battlefield. But we can now see the Ukrainian tank firing on the Russian positions further down the road, making sure to suppress them and slow Russian activities in this area. And we see them continuing to hit the Russian positions further down the road.
Oh, look at that. They've got a little fire of their own happening back there.
Man. I mean, they're slamming them pretty significantly. I would assume that the Russians once again don't really have any large anti-tank abilities for the infantry, but this tank is practically on them now, and it's just firing right into it literally is on them, and it's just firing into the houses, and the Russians are not really able to do anything about it. Truly a sad state of affairs for the Russians.
Just a sitting duck. It's like fish in a barrel, really.
Pitiful, even. Horrendous, I suppose. Dang. But we can see the Ukrainian tank continuing to fire into the small village that we're seeing here. And that's the end of the clip, but still, very, very interesting to see that they were able to lay down some suppressing fire on the Russians. Meanwhile, we also get to see the 95th conducting air denial operations with their drones and taking out another Russian Lancet. This Lancet's of a different design. Interestingly, it has smaller rear stabilizers than a normal Lancet, but nevertheless, they still knocked it out. That may also be showing possibly a different manufacturer somewhere out there, which would be a little bit interesting to know who the different manufacturer of that one is. We also got to see that a new settlement had been retaken south of Sucha. We were able to see that the 33rd Assault Regiment was able to take Makhanovka just south of Sucha, once again restabilizing the defensive positions, which we were able to see in this clip right here. And we're going to be muting that. And we see them hitting the Russian positions.
Interesting, it's not snowing or anything right here in this clip. It's kind of like actually pretty clean looking on the ground.
Yeah, it's a little weird. It's like the snow is covering Russia in splotches, because some of the footage from today has snow in it everywhere. Some others don't. So I'm guessing that Suja is pretty much snow-free, but the areas north of that, near Malaya Lagnia, have a significant amount of snow in them. Also, Matthew, I don't know if you're seeing this, but I think YouTube might be having another numbers reporting issue again, like it did back in the day, because the numbers are fluctuating, like, wildly.
Yeah, I just saw a jump from it was like it's almost 8,000, then it jumped down to like 6,400, and now it's back up to 7,500. It's like playing whack-a-mole with us on the viewership tonight. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I'm telling you, YouTube just it's acting a little wonky these days. But we can see that the Ukrainian 33rd Assault Regiment was able to retake the village and has secured the southern defensive lines near to the town of Suja. The Russians were not able to break through. Moving on from that news inside of the Suja direction, we were also able to see a major smoke plume building up somewhere in Belgorod near to the front line, just south of Giri. We do not know what the flames and the smoke is coming from at the moment, but it is a significant fire and most likely was created because of Ukrainian artillery action in that area. But we still do not know exactly what that is. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we were also able to see Ukrainian BTRD being destroyed as well. And here's the clip. Oh, really quickly.
Gotta have that Chad music too, man. That Chad music is a requirement in these videos.
And we can see the Russian BTR getting targeted here by the Ukrainian drone. We can see it doing one pass. It did a lineup, and now it's going in and slamming on down into the BMD, knocking it out right there. Very nice to see a successful hit like that, and very good to know that the thing's charring. But with that, that's the end of that clip right there. Still very nice to see the Ukrainian border guards hard at work. And moving on from that and deep into the Russian Federation, we have been able to see a large amount of deep strikes conducted by the Ukrainian armed forces overnight. One of them was able to slam into the city of Voronezh. We were able to hear the boom right here. We're also
They got to keep it secret, because you don't know where it's happening. We got to keep that secret. The Russians got to stay real sneaky with that. But you can hear the big boom, though. They want you to hear that.
It's also in Voronezh, by the way, with super secret, though.
Yeah.
We hear the boom again.
Oh.
We do not know what that was. We assume that it was Vadim trying out his new Slav-squatted Lada, but we do not know yet. We're going to be trying to get some more info on this explosion and the damage that may have resulted in Voronezh, because for now we don't really have much to go off of rather than a blurred video and the sound of an explosion in the area of the city. So moving on from that and into Saratov, we were also able to get loads. I mean, this is probably the most documented thing in the war so far. I'm not even going to lie. Loads of videos of a major fuel storage depot in Ingles going up in flames. It's still in flames right now. It was hit yesterday. Yesterday we were not able to cover this news because we were covering the news of the LA fire, but this was a significant hit that the Ukrainians were able to get. This fuel depot is very special looking. I'm sure many of y'all can notice that because many Russian fuel depots look like crap. This one is special because it actually houses a special kind of jet grade fuel used by the Russian Federation just next door at the Ingles Air Base right here. And the Ingles Air Base is a really interesting one. You can actually see the same fuel silos right here with the same kind of ground structure and everything. These are very interesting because they carry a special grade of aviation jet fuel. And that aviation jet fuel is used for the Russian strategic bomber fleet. The Tu-95s are not one of the aircraft involved, but the Tu-160s covered in rubber tires right there, those are actually the ones that use the aviation-grade jet fuel that is specially stored in that major fuel depot just on the other side of Ingalls, right down here. This fuel depot is one of the few in the country that carries this special grade of aviation jet fuel. And this facility was hit significantly yesterday by a Ukrainian long-range drone strike that started a fire that is still raging out of control. At this moment, the winds are actually pushing the fire, from what we know, further south and west, literally the perfect direction, down the facility from where the fire began on its northern side, and it's continuing to consume more and more fuel tanks as it's moving further down the facility. At this moment, it appears that the majority of the aviation-grade jet fuel that the Russian strategic bombers use, we believe that around 70% of it in the country, in Russia, is actually stored in this one fuel depot, which is a little bit of a security concern. I don't know why they do that, but they did it nonetheless, is possibly going to be destroyed. We would assume that probably by the end of this, about 20 to 30% of all Russian aviation-grade jet fuel used for these strategic bombers will most likely have gone up in flames at this facility, and that number, that percentage number, is for the entire country's supply of that kind of aviation grade jet fuel. But we were able to see the videos showing us the fire, and that looks like a hill, but that's actually the giant smoke plume coming from that oil depot.
That's the fire. I thought that was a mountain or something for a second. That's crazy.
Yeah, and look, it just goes across the horizon, Blade. Now, I do have to say this. The folks in Los Angeles are dealing with horrific smoke, but nothing would ever be worse than dealing with the same amount of smoke, but it's literally made out of toxic oil. Like, that you just could not get worse than that.
Yeah, I think this has been burning for at least 24 to 48 hours too, so it's had quite some time to like get really hot and put out a lot of smoke.
Oh, and it's smoking, man. Like, it's smoking hot. Look at that. Oh, and this is from yesterday, by the way. This is when the fire had just begun.
Oh, bliat. Gotta have that Slav music in the background too. Gotta have a little bit of that bop.
Oi, oi, oi. And also, moving on from that, we got loads more clips of this. We also got another clip here, closer to the facility.
Holy crap. Yes, sir, that thing is going up big time.
You know what's cool? We actually know where this guy is. He's on this side of the facility, somewhere around right here, like on the service road, and he's looking downwards on the facility from the northern side looking south. And at this moment in time, the fire was literally sweeping over the rest of the tanks in this depot. So we're assuming, much like the LA fires that are spreading from the wind, this fire is also going to be spread by the wind throughout the rest of the facility, and we are already seeing that that is the case today.
I also like how this guy's running toward the fire instead of away from it. Seems like he's going against the Mother Nature here, but you know, he's being a good cameraman.
Man, he's like, wow, look at this blade. He like seems like Lindsay man blade. And that's
listen to that wind too. They're dealing with some winds like Los Angeles.
Man, I'm telling you, but it's a bad thing for them, really, really bad, because it doesn't look like they're able to put it out. Also, I got to give a huge credit to these brave Russian firefighters, literally standing in the middle of a pool of flammable aviation-grade jet fuel as they try and put out the fire in front of them. You got to give credit to them. Don't know what the hell's wrong with them mentally, but you would think that like the number one thing would be, hey, let's not stand in the middle of a pool of flammable fuel that could catch on fire around us at any minute. Probably not a good idea. Nope, they went with the idea, let's do that, and also let's start pouring foam onto the fire. So let's check this out. So we see,
at least they upgraded to the foam, by the way. Like, that's actually what you're supposed to use as the foam, but then they downgraded by standing in the flammable substance. So they kind of like leveled things out. Look at them. It's falling on their heads.
Man.
Some people are saying it's soap. I mean, it could be soap. I mean, they haven't had foam for ages in Russia. They've been using water and oil fires, and you're not supposed to do that. So they're using foam, but I mean, it could be soap, maybe. I don't know.
Soap or something like that, you know, like from the Call of Duty series. But moving on from that, we did get to see that today the fire's still raging. Oh, wee.
Damn.
Bled.
You think they're gonna lose all their high-grade jet fuel? I think it might all go up.
I think most of it will be lost.
This guy's laughing. That's kind of odd. He's happy about this. He has no clue this is like the end of their strategic bombing campaign.
Man, he's looking up at this literal fire tornado that's forming. He's like, look, it's like a giant fire tornado. That's like, yeah, it is. It's like, it's a fire tornado. You might want to run.
Там нормально, слышь, пацаны-то, блядь.
You know that's got to be hot standing right there. These guys act like there's nothing.
Man, I don't get him. I don't get him at all. And also in another clip that we got from today, like what I was saying, the fire still burning. Also, we hear our apocalyptic Russian radio in the background just to add that nice bit of ambience that you always need in a Russian scene. So that way it sounds like the world's falling apart. You just hear, you know, something like that in the background. It's like, great.
Как раз прям на месте хуярили. Один, короче, въебал разведку.
Oh, it's flaring up over there a little bit.
This will result in 10 years in the gulag for these guys.
Тачка сгорела, да. Это первая, по-моему. Блять.
Я отсюда отогнал 5 цистерн, все, у меня здесь все чисто. Вон, да, цистерна же горит.
Да, цистерна, 100%.
Не успели они, значит, с той стороны.
He's like, let's watch the Texas smoke blade a little longer. Oh, blade, it's like flaring up and everything.
What I wonder what the hell they're yelling on the radio. Like, you know, with the chaos going on, it's like, what could they be yelling that's that urgent? Every other fire department around the world, like, has some level of calm. Even as their city is burning down, Los Angeles, there's some level of calm to it. There's just, like, uncouth chaos, like, when Russians, like, try to deal with a fire.
Man, you know what it reminds me of, man? It reminds me of that Swedish chef from Sesame Street that's always, like, in a state of chaos. You know what I mean? He's like, yep, you know, something like that. That's like a Russian firefighter every time a fire starts. We can also see the same clips here. This is largely a duplicate of the clips that we just saw, still included. And we also were able to see, once again, it's burning to the ground. Check that out. This is all the way from Ingles, by the way. This is what they're seeing in the town. It's like daylight in Ingles.
It's a new Russian feature, daylight at night.
I don't know Russian well, but I can be a translator here. He said, "What the F is this?" like like you can tell, he was like, "What is this?" Man, she's just out of breath watching it burn. Like, it's just like, wow.
Oh, look, an iPhone in the hands of a Russian that hates America. What do you know?
Like, hit America buys an iPhone and then wears a NASA hoodie. It's like, man, you just hate it that much, don't you?
It was only designed in California, Bliat. It was not actually assembled. It was assembled in China.
It was assembled by a 13-year-old Chinese boy in an Apple shop in China. It's like, okay, well, I guess that maybe is the point a little bit, but I think they've moved the production facilities, haven't they?
I think they might have moved a few to India, I think.
Ah, yes, the new China. But moving on from that and out of Ingles, by the way, I'm just kidding about that. There's like a whole diplomatic thing going on with that. It's actually kind of in our interest to hope that everything moves to India. But moving on from Ingles and out of that area, we also were able to see that up near Nizhny Novgorod, something very, very nasty happened. It was something interesting, actually. I'm telling y'all, if I could ever stop this cough one day, I will. Matthew was like, you need to take cough syrup before I got on stream tonight. I was like, nah, it did nothing, so I'm just not taking it. But this is the Nizhny Novgorod hydroelectric power plant. It holds back the entire Volga River. It's a pretty big reservoir. It's actually called the Gorky Reservoir, just to make it sound a little bit more Slavic. But beyond that, this is the Nizhny Novgorod hydropower plant, and this provides electricity to the area of the city of Nizhny Novgorod, which is right here. This thing caught on fire today pretty significantly. We don't even think it was from a Ukrainian action. We just think that it caught on fire for some reason, but there's the fire.
It's weird, too. Like, we didn't get much detail about it, but yeah, you see the fire coming out the top, so I wonder what happened with it.
I don't know. Still an interesting sight and something to really note right there. Something really to note. But while Russian infrastructure is burning to the ground, we do have to keep in mind that they were kind of lauding and laughing at the burning of LA the other day. So I have a feeling that all this fire that's going around Russia is a bit well deserved at this point. But another thing that we do have to remember is that Russia has been in the business of destroying Western infrastructure for some time now. And currently there is a Russian ghost ship that has been seized by the Finns as they are investigating the vessel dragging its anchor over vital communications and electrical links in between the Baltics and Finland. And at the moment, it does seem as though NATO is starting to take this to be a more serious risk, as we have been able to hear that NATO ships, a fleet of 10 of them, have been sent into the Baltic Sea to protect undersea cables from Russian sabotage. And the vessels will be staying in the area until April. We do not know if this is a picture of that actual fleet. It appears to be made up of smaller patrol vessels, not large frigates or destroyers or anything of that caliber, but still, it is NATO's first line of defense against Russian sabotage of vital communications and electric links that travel along the bottom of the Black Sea. Hopefully they will be able to protect our critical infrastructure in that area, because it appears that the Russians are not able to recover their critical infrastructure from other areas. And that brings us to Syria. The Russians have not been able to enter the port of Tartus, and we've noted, War Translated has noted, that Russian ships have been unable to enter the port of Tartus in Syria for 5 days to evacuate their military contingent. And at the Tartus naval base, Russian forces are waiting for these ships to transport equipment, personnel, and weapons. And it is highly likely that the new Syrian authorities are not granting permission for Russian evacuation ships to enter the port. And while we are hearing about that at sea, we have satellite footage confirming that the Russians are still stuck there. There's all of their equipment still stuck at Tartus port, and it appears that the Syrian interim government is not allowing them to enter the port to be able to retrieve the remainder of their equipment and personnel and get out of there. So at this moment,
I think all that equipment's going to have to be left behind, because with them sitting out there for 5 days and that government not letting them get the stuff back, I think they're going to actually withhold it. I'm not sure if maybe that's because the new Syrian regime is a little bit more friendly to the West and maybe they're doing us a favor or something, but it seems a bit odd that they're not letting them back. So they also not only have some equipment on the ground there in Syria, they also have some soldiers that are left behind with the equipment that Russia needs to get back as well. So right now they're not getting anything.
and it sounds as though it's a horrendous situation for the Russians. Very unfortunate, very sad. Who could have seen anything like this happen? I mean, it's like the Russians don't know how the hell to leave a country. It's like they're leaving Afghanistan or something. You know, what's crazy is that they actually did do that when they left Afghanistan back in 1989. Oh, man, you thought I was talking about America, didn't you? No. The Russians are truly the worst at leaving a place. But also, I do want to make sure to make a quick clarification here. Let me do what some others have done. I'm sorry, many people have been waiting for this video. I was wrong. Old Warrior got it right. I accidentally put down a marker for 10 NATO vessels entering the Baltic into the Black Sea, and I said they were entering the Black Sea. They are not. They are actually in the Baltic. So a little bit of a correction.
I was confused when you said that. I was thinking, I was like, does he mean I'm like, surely he doesn't mean the Black Sea, because I heard it was the Baltic earlier. So I was wondering if you were talking about something different.
Yeah, I actually was mistaken on that one. I don't know why earlier I was putting together the news and I saw it say Baltic and then I thought Black Sea and I was like, oh, well, I guess that's a prudent measure, and then I put it down there. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, that's kind of weird because I don't think NATO vessels are allowed to enter or exit the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles along with the Russian vessels, and that's correct. So I don't even know why in the world my brain thought that it was in the southern Black Sea, because literally the words say Baltic and I typed Baltic and then I put in the Black Sea. That's just stupidity on me. I goofed. Sorry about that. Sometimes that happens, I suppose. But moving on from that, while I sound like someone who's been working in the coal mines all day, we're now going to be moving on down into Yemen, as we were able to hear that the Royal Air Force and the United States Air Force were conducting airstrikes yesterday in the Jarban area within the Yemeni capital of Sana'a, controlled by the Yemeni Houthis. We did not get any updates on the ground or video or picture evidence of the actual damage caused, but it does appear that the attacks were significant, and hopefully we'll be able to get more information from U.S. CENTCOM sometime in the future. Moving on from that, though, and back up to Ukraine, we still have loads of news to cover up here. Actually, it's still a very large amount. But before we get into it, I do want to make sure that we answer a couple of questions, and then, and only then, will we move into the rest of the news. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and before we jump into our first super chat, we do have a poll currently running, and the poll says Zelensky has recently requested NATO troops deploy to Ukraine for defense, and is this request realistic? So, about 39% of the audience said it is a realistic option, while 32% said no, that will not happen, and 22% said only if NATO's red lines are crossed will NATO troops get deployed to Ukraine. And Zelensky had been asking for this, by the way, for some time. He had given up on asking for it, I think, a few months back, and he's actually returned to asking for it once again. And he kind of approached it in a little bit of a more passive way this time. He really wasn't demanding it, but he was definitely asking for it. So I would say that honestly, this is definitely not realistic. Putting NATO troops in Ukraine would mean a direct war with Russia, and NATO is not ready for that just yet. In fact, NATO is not even ready to extend membership to Ukraine just yet while the war is ongoing. So I really doubt that unless a red line is crossed, then NATO troops will probably not be going to Ukraine. So I'm with the 22%. But if Russia does do something crazy, like, for example, launch a nuke at Ukraine or do something wild like that, then it might be on the table then, maybe. But until then, I would say no. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I would be with a 33%. This is not going to happen. NATO troops are not going to be deploying to Ukraine. That would be an offensive action. The NATO Charter specifically forbids any sort of offensive action being conducted by the NATO alliance as a group. He can request for individual countries to come to his aid and move troops into Ukraine, but the NATO alliance as a whole cannot do that. The alliance and the charter simply is not written to allow something like that. That would be an offensive action as far as the NATO charter is concerned, because the NATO alliance would have to come together and say, we are invoking Article 5 without any actual grounds to invoke it. Because Article 5 can only be invoked by defensive measures laid out in Article 4 and then further expounded on in Article 6. They would have to say, we've had no justifications for defensive actions under Article 4 and Article 6, but nevertheless, we're going to invoke Article 5 just cause. That doesn't even work on the Charter, so they wouldn't even be able to move forward to allowing NATO to take any kind of action in Ukraine by moving troops into this point, and so for that reason, that just wouldn't happen. There's no framework in NATO to allow for something like that. On the other hand, though, that's not to say that no country in NATO could move their troops into Ukraine. Poland could individually, or France for that matter, considering that they've always been the most vocal about it, could move their troops into Ukraine if they wanted to on their own. It's just that they cannot do it on the behalf of NATO, and they cannot do it as a alliance-wide initiative. It can just be done by country to country, because they still maintain the sovereignty to be able to make their own offensive decisions, but when it comes to defensive decision-making, that's a collective action by NATO. So in this particular instance, this would not happen. Zelensky's request is largely it's existing for and I don't mean this in the domestic political sense. It more so exists for international political interests to make a statement like that, because it's trying to make it seem like NATO isn't doing enough when NATO simply can't even do this because the charter doesn't allow for it in the framework. So that's really what's going on with that, at least from what I could tell, because that's like saying the European Union should build an army, and the European Union isn't a defensive alliance, it's an economic partnership, and they cannot build a military like that. It's just not allowed under the EU charter. So I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And also, Burnaby Alex said, could France take the Crimea Bridge? Let's see. Some people are talking about NATO. NATO is not a useless alliance. NATO has a lot of purpose to it, but it's entirely defensive by nature. NATO is not supposed to be a military alliance of the classical sense, where you could conduct offensive and defensive actions and decide that as an alliance-wide deal. The modern concept, or the modern philosophy behind self-determining governments and the waging of warfare, is that outside of extreme emergency measures or circumstances, war is supposed to be conducted as a defensive measure only, and not one of an offensive action. And NATO was built in the late 1940s off of that very kind of a principle, that self-determining governments in the West only would wage war in a defensive form. And that largely is the form that we've carried on well on into the present day. The only time that we saw that that was not the case was during the well, really, the Gulf War of 1991 was a defensive war as well, as we were defending the nation of Kuwait that had been invaded by Saddam Hussein and forcing Saddam Hussein to leave Kuwait. So that could even be classified as a defensive war of American interests and American backed countries that had security guarantees. The invasion of Afghanistan could be classified as defensive as well, as that was in response to 9/11. Really, the only war in modern times that was not a purely defensive war was the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and that was done on the exigent circumstance that we believed that the Iraqis were creating a weapon of mass destruction. And that was one of the few rare times that self-determining governments could justify an offensive action, because the British supported us full in on the invasion of Iraq in 2003 and were within the southern area of Iraq at that time. But beyond that, that is something that we largely understand is one of the few circumstances where we could see a Western democratic country take offensive action is in a situation where we believe a country is creating a weapon of mass destruction, like we thought Iraq was during 2003. But beyond that, NATO is a good alliance. It's not supposed to be an offensive one. It's supposed to be a defensive one. And I personally do believe that for the large part, unless if there is some sort of a rare emergency circumstance, like Iran possibly creating a nuclear weapon, which it still seems as though they are on track to try and do that, offensive wars are not our cup of tea. That's just not what the United States does, and that's not what the Western world is supposed to do. The Western world tries to work through legal warfare, if you want to call it that, where you try and use international law and diplomatic negotiations to be able to try and gain leverage over our opponents. We generally want to avoid war and use it as a last case scenario, and a last case scenario of defense. I would not ever recommend conducting an offensive war against China or North Korea. Let them aggress on us first, and that gives us a great justification to go all in on that war, because we were the ones who were attacked. We were not the belligerent in any of those conflicts. So that's why I would largely say NATO isn't a weak alliance. It's incredibly strong, because think about it. Who in the world has attacked NATO ever? Nobody. Because they're scared of what the defensive alliance is. If we turn it into an offensive and a defensive alliance, there isn't a collective deterrent anymore, because we could just end up attacking anyone at any time without any notice. But with it being a defensive alliance, it is a major deterrent for anyone to conduct any aggressive actions against any member, because if you bomb Croatia, you're going to get obliterated by the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Poland, and Spain, Italy, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Canada, and everyone else in the alliance simultaneously. So it's a great deterrent defensively. I'd never think that NATO should be structured in the form of the charter to where it is also an offensive organization as well, because that largely falls out of the philosophy that we have in the Western world, that wars are supposed to be purely defensive and never really offensive in nature, unless if it's an emergency scenario. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, and also how the NATO Charter was largely formed and created historically. But with that, we are on to a couple of questions, because I do understand that we have some very interesting questions in the chat. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so our first super chat goes to Old Warrior, who's of course a channel legend, and thank you very much, Old Warrior, for that very generous $50 support, and we appreciate that very much because it helps to keep the channel running. And Old Warrior said, my favorite meme, countries with a chicken on their flag should not invade a country with a fork on theirs.
And that's an interesting one, Old Warrior. That's an interesting meme right there. I like that one though. That's a pretty good one, and that's a pretty smart way to put it, because the fork's gonna eat that chicken, that's for sure. But I got to thank you so much for the support, Old Warrior, and helping this channel to keep on running. I believe that you were also here last night. I got to thank you so much for supporting the channel on both nights. It appears that the channel is getting, to be entirely honest with everyone, it appears that we're getting smaller viewership because a lot of people are focused on the LA fire, which I completely understand. To be entirely honest, it's been pulling us to the screens all day today. Either I've been reading books today, or I've been watching what's going on with the LA fire, and it is incredibly horrendous. So anyone who's not here watching right now, that's over on another stream showing the fires in LA and covering that news live right now, I completely understand, because a lot of people in America are absolutely horrified with the scenes that are coming out of Los Angeles right now, and the fact that so many more fires are beginning to break out. And we're now hearing that one of the new fires that broke out in side of the area of northern Los Angeles at the Kenneth Fire, that may have actually been an actual act of arson. Now possibly suggesting that other fires that have been created so far may have as well been acts of arson, although we're not entirely sure yet. And also, let's see, So it does look like the Sunset Fire has been extinguished, if I'm correct, Matthew.
Oh, that's good.
Let's see. Because it's not showing any size of the Sunset Fire at this point. So I believe that the Sunset Fire was defeated, as well as the one in Studio City. So there were major victories that had been had by the United States so far in fighting the fires. But we are now hearing that the Kenneth Fire has rapidly expanded. I believe in less than an hour, it already had exceeded 1,000 acres in size. And we're also hearing that the Palisades Fire and the Eden Fire are continuing. And we can see that the Eden Fire has pretty much consumed most of Altadena at this point, all the way up to Interstates 210. So it's a very sad thing to see. But beyond that, if anyone's out watching that instead of this channel, we entirely understand and we entirely get it. And if you are from Los Angeles right now, I thank you all for watching. And once again, we are all with you here in the Lee Spring Army, because Americans always stand together and will always back each other up during difficult times. But still, let's see here. Old Warrior said they think a 3,000 acre fire is big. We have 300,000 acre fires here in the spring. That is true, but the thing with Los Angeles is that these fires are not in the wilderness where fires can get wildly large, like the Camp Fire back in 2018 in California, and they can cause a lot of damage, but they don't really end up affecting a lot of people. Right now, to put it into perspective for all of y'all, how big this is, 300,000 people are refugees right now in Los Angeles because of these fires. That's the entire city of Birmingham, Alabama, or that's the entire city of Huntsville, Alabama, that had to pack up their bags and leave their houses, and everything they've owned has been destroyed back where they were living, and they have nowhere to live at this point. They will not even be able to collect home insurance because all of the insurance policies for wildfires were canceled just months prior. It's an incredible tragedy that's going on right now in the city of Los Angeles, and it's terrible to even think about it, really, what's going on out there. And you know, when you think about that in scale, no singular incident in Ukraine involving a battle has affected this many people except for the Battle of Mariupol. Mariupol had 500,000 people in that city. 50,000 of them ended up dying in that battle, the civilians at least. And in this city alone, 300,000 people, it's about 60%, 60 to 65%. The amount of people that lived in Mariupol have been affected from the fire right now. And there's about, I believe, another 1 million to 1.5 million that are under evacuation warnings, which may be ordered to evacuate at any minute now. So it is horrific when you really think about it, the damage that these fires are causing. They're not big in the picture, in the big picture of fires that we've seen inside the United States. There are quite many that are far larger than these, but these, crazily enough, are the most destructive fires that have ever been seen in U.S. history. These fires have caused more monetary damage than any other fire we have seen in the United States of America's history since its founding in 1776 and since the ratification of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which recognized us as a legitimate country. No fire has ever been this destructive since then, and even before then in the United States. So it's a horrific thing to hear about, and to be quite honest, I was really fighting to not want to cover this entirely tonight. We're still going to keep on with our normal news coverage tonight because we know that all of y'all are here for the Ukraine war news, but it's just a terrible tragedy to see. We're Matthew and me are very civically minded, and we like to view ourselves as patriotic folks, and so we hate to see that a major city in the United States that not only is a major city but also a cultural icon to many Americans is currently burning to the ground right now. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible, Old Warrior, and keep it running, whether we were covering the Los Angeles fire last night, or if we're covering the news of the war in Ukraine again today. We are always happy to know that so many people come to this channel and choose it to be their primary source of news, because if it wasn't for folks like you, Old Warrior, who went out of their way to support this channel, even when you don't have to, we would not be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing running day in and day out. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second one here is going to go to John Boback, who is also a channel legend and puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, John, for supporting the channel as well. And he says, on behalf of the LSA family, thank you for both you Enforcers Do and Miss Disa, and take a question from the chat. LSA. And look at that, Miss Disa got a shout out as well. And thank you very much, John, for shouting everybody out, and we appreciate the support.
And I got to thank you so much for the support, John Bobek. And I got to say that it is great to know that Miss Disa got a shout out. Miss Disa, the keeper of the records, a massive part of making sure that the casualty report is accurate every day. And I got to say a big thanks to you, John Bobek, for supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you who helped to support this channel and make it possible, we wouldn't be able to do this day in and day out. Right now, we're, like I was talking about earlier, we're having a smaller viewership, I would assume, because of the LA fires. But beyond that, we are happy to know that so many people are here with us listening to the news of the war in Ukraine. And once again, I do highly suggest to everyone that y'all do pay attention to the LA fires and keep those folks in your mind. There's a lot of people who've been affected by it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands. It beats out anything that we've seen so far. And I actually saw someone bring up last night, not to keep talking about this during the question segment, but it's been on my mind the whole stream what's going on in LA, and I hope that folks are all right out there. But something that is crazy is that let's see, what was the name of that hurricane, Matthew, that went through North Carolina? I keep forgetting its name.
Was it Harvey? I can't remember the name of it.
Jeez, man, I can't remember the name of the hurricane. We'll just say it was a hurricane. It was a very significant one. It actually skirted right by us. We're very lucky because it was actually planned that it was going to go straight over Birmingham, and so we would have been in the line of fire then. But it actually went through the area around Asheville, and it just tore the place up. We didn't really get to cover it a lot. Because it came and went so quickly that there was no way for us to cover it. And as a matter of fact, we were kind of in the storm on the very edge of it a little bit, so there wasn't really a way to cover it that day. But that also afflicted hundreds of thousands of people. But the crazy thing is that was a hurricane. And it affected hundreds of thousands of people. And it was a thing that came and went in just one night. It was over by the next day, and there wasn't really much to talk about because the damage was done. There was no active incident to talk about, which is kind of how we run this news. We can't really talk about something, and it was Helene, apparently. Thank you, everyone, for sharing that. We can't really cover news unless if it's actually happening. It's very hard to just say the hurricane came through and then here's damage. There's not really a lot for us to work on with how we run the show because it was done and over with. The LA fires are an ongoing thing. The fires are continuously growing and spreading. Arsonists are catching areas on fire like the Kenneth fire, and it's something that is ongoing that actually can be talked about in the way that we run the stream. A story can actually be made about it instead of it just being a singular incident and then there was results. So that's kind of why we didn't get to cover that. But even crazier still, I believe at this point the same amount of people were affected by Hurricane Helene that have been affected in LA so far from the fires. Just kind of once again give a concept of scale. Because this is happening in a very heavily, a densely populated urban area. So this is probably, this is, once again, the worst urban fire that we've ever seen inside the United States ever. And that's really sad to think about. But anyways, with that, I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because we are still happy, regardless whether we have a lot of people here or not, to be able to cover the news to each and every one of y'all and let y'all know what's going on, not just in LA yesterday, but also in Ukraine and around the world today. And so a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And let's get a live chat in honor of John Bobek, Matthew. What do we got?
All right, so the live chat question right here is going to go to Neshoba, who says, would you agree that NATO is still using rules made nearly 80 years ago, and they're pretty much outdated at this point?
I would say that they're not. I would say that they've actually stood up pretty well to the test of time. Wars are only fought offensively and defensively, and back then the plan was that wars were only to be fought defensively, and that generally has been what we followed. I mean, you could actually say that it was far more outdated if we're going off the idea that we need to operate offensively. It was far more outdated back then because people forget that the Soviet Union marched into countries like Czechoslovakia and Hungary and literally put people down and shot them when they were going through their own small protests and revolutions in the 50s. There was a huge argument that you could have made, literally pretty much the inception of NATO, that NATO was useless because we weren't coming to the defense of these poor, helpless people that were getting gunned down by Soviet troops in Hungary and the Czechoslovakian regions. But nevertheless, we remained defensive in form, and it has ended up serving us well. It's a strong deterrent for anyone that joins NATO. I mean, hell, you don't see Estonia getting invaded anytime soon. They practically have no military. But they will never be touched. They will never be invaded by the Russians because they have the entirety of the NATO alliance backing them. I would personally believe that the NATO alliance is as strong and effective now as it really ever has been, because the concept of defense as a deterrent is a very good one, and it has worked ever since the NATO alliance has been created. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on back into the rest of the news. So, what do we got for our final question of this segment, Matthew?
All right, so our last super chat of the segment goes to Glock Glock, who's there, who's of course a longtime channel viewer as well, and thank you very much, Glock Glock, for that support. That $20 support, that is, and we appreciate it. And Glock said, what do y'all think about Russian transport ships off of Syria, and could Ukraine hit them with sea drones?
They're too far away to be hit with sea drones, unfortunately. They would literally have to drive the sea drones all the way around Anatolia to make it there, so that's pretty much out of the picture. But beyond that, the Russian vessels that are sitting outside of Tartus right now and are unable to pick up the equipment appear to be stopped by the Syrian interim government. It looks like the interim government is threatening some sort of action against Russia if they violate their pretty much port authority orders in that area right now to be able to pick up their equipment. So it looks as though the Syrian interim government is very hostile to the Russian Federation at the outset, which is a good thing. That is exactly what we're looking for in the Syrian interim government, and hopefully we'll be able to make sure that they remain anti-Russian like that, because if we're able to make the Russians abandon a large amount of that equipment in Syria, they really lack the industrial or really the monetary abilities to be able to rebuild that equipment in Russia again, so they'll be pretty much losing that for good from this point forward. So, in my personal opinion, I think it's a very good thing to hear that those vessels are stuck outside of Tartus, because it's not only showing that diplomatically Syria is moving into the West's pocket, which is a great pocket for them to move towards, it's also showing us that in the war in Ukraine, they may continue to be materially deprived of more equipment to continue the war, which they're already, from what we hear, running into equipment shortages, because once again, U.S. intelligence did say today that around 60 to 65% of all Russian military equipment has been destroyed in Ukraine so far. That's in every category combined, it's around 65%. So that is very good to hear, and hopefully we'll be able to see that another small sliver of that is lost in Tartus. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that question incredibly well. And with that, dang, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news that we have tonight. And we were able to hear that up in the area of Kyiv, we got an air defense report yesterday. 41 of the 64 drones that Russia launched were shot down. And we were able to hear that an additional 22 drones, meaning that there was around 63 intercepted in total, were misguided by electronic warfare systems and ended up harmlessly landing or exploding somewhere in the field, not harming anyone. So it appears that the interception rate was the closest that we've ever seen to 100%, which is impressive to hear. Meanwhile, in our location unknowns, we were also able to see a couple of other interesting things. We were able to see a picture of the 1st Brigade's National Guards unit. Pretty cool. Like the rifles.
That goes hard.
It goes hard. Feel free to screenshot. Moving on from that into our next clip, we also got to see some new armor protection that the Russians have. They also added this mine, so that way you could try and hit it like a bullseye target to just blow up the whole tank. And they also have several.
Terrible idea, right? No, go ahead.
Oh, no, please, go ahead. I think we're going through some lag here, but please, go ahead.
Well, that's a terrible idea to put that on the side. One Russian's going to go by and literally bop that. He's going to be like, oh, what can that be? I think he's going to hit it and it's just going to blow the whole thing up. I guarantee you it's coming.
Or, better yet, they're driving this thing around and a Ukrainian FPV drone is sizing it up, and then they just run right into the mine and then they get double damage. Instead of just the FPV drone, they literally added a mine that will just blast through the armor. They put another one on the other side as well. I don't know what these are for. Like, I don't know what the purpose is. This is only, adding to the jeopardy of the vehicle being lost. So I'm not really understanding the philosophy behind putting anti-tank mines on the side of the cope cage armor, but they're still doing it, and that's interesting in its own right. But, oh well. Anyways, moving on from that, we did get to see the Russian casualty report for the past 24 hours as well, and
oh my goodness, oh boy. We've got 5 Bobcat skid steers taken out in one fell swoop. I love to see that. And also, it looks like the other losses were crazy high, actually in pretty much every category today. So, Enforcer, tell us more.
And I gotta tell you, man, the losses are significant. Miss D said, the keeper of the record, said the troops' losses are lower, but the 7-day average is steady in the 1,500 to 1,600 range. 17 tanks is the largest since November 23rd of 2024, and the artillery and special equipment losses are above the 7-day average. And so now, let's break them down by the numbers. 1,430 Russian and North Korean soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 16 APCs, 80 supply trucks, 17 main battle tanks, 36 artillery pieces, 86 drones, and 5 Bobcat skid steers. So overall, it does appear to be that the losses are still high, and the Russians are suffering. Cope and seethe. Moving on from that and up into the Kupiansk area, we were able to see a recent combat mission being conducted by a Ukrainian helicopter as they play Trap Remix over the video. When you see him popping off them flares and turning hard left, look at him go.
Man, I love that mask, by the way. Just very vicious looking, like,
Man, honestly, though, it looks like if that mask was a real mouth, and that guy was talking with that mouth, that he would talk like something like this, man. He would go into the restaurant and be like, "You got some ketchups?" or something like that. I don't know why, man. Like, it just comes off that way.
It's venom. It's the venom.
Maybe. But still, I feel like if like you tried to talk with a mouth like that in real life, you would have like a really strong lisp, almost like Mike Tyson, but worse. But we can see the Ukrainian helicopters skirting above the tree lines. Skirt! That one really skirted above the tree lines up there. And now he's getting low. Look at him. He's literally right above the snow. They're going to make their coffee and drink it made of snow.
And they have plenty of snow to work with because, of course, on Tuesday, they'll shoot the birds and eat them for grill.
And that's the end of that clip right there. And very nice to hear that they will shoot them and eat them. But moving on from that, we also got to hear that the situation is a little bit tough in this area because Ukrainian officials have said the Russian forces are 2 kilometers from Kupiansk's outskirts, according to officials, and the situation in the town is very difficult, according to the head of the Kupiansk town military administration. So it does appear that things are going a little bit tougher up in the Kupiansk area, but hopefully they will be able to pull through. Meanwhile, we were able to see some Russian forces getting hit in this Vadove area of the front, which we can see right here. Boom, shakalaka.
Oh, hit the Zala Zala.
Ding! And here comes another one. Oh! And they got it.
Hitting them on the Ragnarok. Raggy drone.
Like a zoink scoop. I think we're knocking them out. Raggy, say 4. But moving on from that and out of those clips, we were also able to see further down the line at Kremenna, a Russian turtle tank got hit and knocked out by the 63rd Brigade. Here it comes. Look at the little fella. Little itty bitty fella, and here comes the drone, going right through the back of the shed, hitting the turtle tank. And the turtle tank continues to roll on, pulls over. Actually, it turns a hard left now. They said, call this thing Karl Marx, because we turning this bitch left. And then went straight to the field for no reason. And then backed
Where'd
her
that
up.
reference come from, by the way?
Huh?
Where'd that reference come from, by the way?
I have no clue. I kind of came up with that one on the spot. I think there was like a joke like that a long time ago I heard. And then it was like, I think it was like, call us Vladimir Lenin because we turned in this thing left or something like that. I forgot. But anyways, well, you see them slamming down a little bit more right there. Oh.
Slamming them.
Oh, man, they're hitting them hard.
Giving them the slammy with the Shrike Brigade.
And they're hitting them in with a slammer. See, Scott gets it. He played in an LOL. Oh, man, every time I laugh, every time I try to laugh, I have to make it really animated sounding. Y'all can probably hear that I'm about to start coughing every time I do it. But moving on.
I can hear it sound like sandpaper.
Yeah, it's not. It feels like sandpaper. But moving on from that, we also got to see a Ukrainian tank in Seversk. And, well, they were deleted it, so we're not going to be seeing that one. But we also did get to see some Russian forces getting hit in that area as well. And so here's the clip. Oh, Zadachny. But we can see them bringing the drone on down, hitting a van, and now they're going for a second one. Oh, what's this? It appears that we're entering a slideshow. And here we go. The van was hit.
Oh, no. The slideshow was interrupted by some video streams. Good thing it came back.
Oh, it's a blessing indeed. A blessing for sure. And we now see them hitting more Russian forces. You see the.
I wonder if these little like antenna things on the front of these drones right here. I wonder if that's like much more helpful than not having them because they seem to have added these like within the last couple of months.
Man, I've been seeing these things for years, like maybe at least 2. I think, like that's how long I remember. I honestly cannot remember a time in the war where they didn't have the close hangers on the drones. Like to be entirely honest, maybe I'm just like Maybe I'm forgetful or something. What happened? Maybe, you know, who knows. But anyways, moving on from that and down towards Touretsk, we also get to see the Russian drones getting hit down here. This is like some of the most common footage that we get to see these days is anti-drone activity.
That's one thing that's consistent. At least if they're not hitting other stuff, at least they're smacking these drones. The Russians will never fly a drone in peace.
Man, and they're getting them good. Oh, look at it. Oh, and oh, they got it again. Wonderful stuff. Beautiful stuff. You just can't miss it. You can't miss it. Oh, by the way, before we just, you know, skirt on by the area, forgot to mention to y'all, the Ukrainians literally destroyed an entire army headquarters. They were able to strike a Russian command post. This is the command post of the 8th Guards Combined Arms Army that was hit back there.
Прилеты прям, это Харциз, да? Да. На въезде прям Харциз прилеты. Фу, блядь.
And we get a bot coming in going, Russia's still winning! And it's like, no. It's like, nah. Go live in delusion land. But we also get to see here the headquarters that got hit. They were playing Minecraft CD C148 over it as it was shown. They blurred out most of the building, so it's really hard to assess the damage, but the headquarters was hit. Oh, MASH, na Dosane, or like Donbass. That's so they have a MASH Donbass like sub office. But anyways, we got to see that the Ukrainian armed forces did report that they hit the 8th Guards Combined Arms Army headquarters and was able to knock it out. What a wonderful thing! What a wonderful place! What a wonderful world! Because today. Because of that, we have heard of nothing going on in Pokrovsk. I'm guessing that they only had one headquarters. Be stupid if they did. Usually you have about 3 that at that level, so that way if one gets knocked out, the backup one takes over. But apparently they only had one, because we didn't hear of anything going on in Pokrovsk today, or in the Pokrovsk front at all. So it looks as though that hit may have had some major impacts on Russian fighting abilities inside of the Kupiansk front. Moving on from that and down into southern Zaporizhia, we also get to see some Russian artillery getting hit. 2 Gansens. Check it out, blade. 44th Okrema Atarlatsky Brigada ended up taking them out. I butchered that badly. Do not think that that was good. But we can see them here hitting a Gansent B, blade.
And it now smashed, blad. It smashed the bits.
It was a bash. It was a Russian smash. You know, like the Monster Mash song.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do get that reference. I do get that one.
Have you seen them hitting another Gansent B? I'm not gonna lie, man. Oh, heavens, the tuberculosis, it grips me. But beyond that, I'm not gonna lie, man. You know what Gansent Bs look like? They look like long toms from World War II. You know what I'm talking about? You know?
Let's see a picture. I need to see the reference.
Let's see. I accidentally clicked on something else there. But let's see here. Here we go. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Buster. I'm talking about this thing, Buster. You see how it has like the 4 wheels? You see how it has the 4 wheels? See? It looks like a long tom. Look at that.
Yeah, it kind of does. It looks like the back part of like one of those old military trucks that they just put an artillery piece on. It's kind of like it, actually.
I honestly think it's kind of goofy because you know the last time we used long toms? It's freaking Korea. We used these things like 70 years ago. They're still using them today.
That's goofy, man. But you know, the Russians, they don't have good modern stuff. So the best they could do is like, you know, freaking decades ago for what we had. So this is like high tech for them. It's better than a museum piece.
Gansent B. Let me go check on that. Because I think, holy moly, this thing's like new for them. It's like from 1976. They were like designing like World War II era artillery in the late 70s. Real Soviet.
And you know, they didn't design it. They stole it, probably. They probably stole the design.
Man, they said, man, that long time business kind of looks good. And then they just literally copied it, like almost verbatim. It's crazy. It's kind of like how they copied the F-111 Aardvark right here, this plane. Which is actually, it was a pretty good plane, by the way, for its time. They copied it, and then they just created the Su-24 Bliet. Look at that. Like, that's like almost the same thing.
Yeah, they just copy everything, kind of like China does, too. They just take our stuff and just copy it.
Man, like how we made the B-1 Lancer. You know, like this thing. And then they're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Let's go make the Tu-160 blade. And then they just made that, And it's like, they just can't.
It's just stealing, man. It's just copying. Like, they can't do this.
They get their rocks off trying to imitate us. They hate us because they ain't us. You know what I mean? But moving on from that, now out of that whole deal right there, we can see the other Gyansen B getting sent to the heavens here in this clip.
Oh, and it did. It got blasted. You got ripped to shreds. Your artillery's not even on the ground, man. Come on, man.
I don't know what it is, Matthew, but every once in a while your microphone makes it sound like you're getting shot. Like, I don't know what it is, but you were like, your stick's not even on the ground, man. I was like, did you just die? Like, I was like, what's going on over there? Like, it sounded like an NKVD hitman just got behind you and popped you. No lie.
Who knows, man? But as long as I'm coming through somewhat, that's all I can hope for these days.
But listen to this. Like, I don't know what it is, but you were like, your stick's not even on that. You know what I mean? But moving on from that, now out of that whole deal right there, we can see the other Gyansen B getting sent to the heavens here in this clip. Here it comes, man. It's coming here any second now.
Oh, and it did. It got blasted. You got ripped to shreds.
Here it comes.
Your artillery's not even on the ground, man. Come on, man.
Right there. It's like,
oh my god, it did sound like a gunshot. What the hell was that? I don't even know what that is. Like, real, I didn't know like how that even sounded. That's kind of weird. Like, it sounds like a gunshot.
Dude, that came through so loud in my headset, it actually made me jump for a second. That's the only reason why I mentioned it, is because I jumped from it. Like, I thought someone literally was shooting like outside the wall or something. I was like,
it sounds like I'm riding around like one of those old like 1960s jalopies or something like that. That has backfires going on with it. It sounds like I'm driving around in one of those and talking on the microphone at the same time. Hello, good heavens, good sir. How are you? Bang, bang. Oh, good to see you.
Your stick's not even on the ground, man. It's like, what is that? I don't know. But anyways, moving on out of that, now the Zaporizhia front, it is time for us to circle back around, right on time, mind you all, to Kyiv. Because it's time to get the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, not on the 27th of December. Oh, no. We're getting it from the 8th of January. What the hell's going on here? What's going on? Hang on. What's going on here, Matthew? What's going on here?
An error occurred. What the hell? Like, refresh it or something.
I did. I refreshed it, and then I clicked it. It's doing it again. Hang on. I'm going to go pull up this playback error. No, I don't want to loop it. I want to be a whooper. Let's see here. We need to figure. You know what? I'm going to go to YouTube and try and pull it up there. Maybe we can get it there instead. Let's see here. President of Ukraine. President office of the President of Ukraine.
What is this? Hey, there he is. I'm hearing Zelensky. Yes, sir.
So, here we go. So apparently the office of the President of Ukraine's website isn't able to pull up the video, but I, with masterful precision, was able to type in youtube.com and go find the video on his, and also someone just said restart the browser. Cannot do that because we are in the middle of a show. Like, it's not possible. But beyond that, we do have the speech from President Zelensky. So let me make sure to get the subtitles up and everything over here on the second screen. And here we go. And without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Українці, українки, зараз в Запоріжжі триває рятувальна операція. Був удар російських бомб по місту, просто по цивільних людях. На жаль, 13 людей убиті. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Поранені 32 людини. Усім надається допомога. Це був удар просто по місту, по звичайним людям. Абсолютно свідомий удар російської армії. Це знов демонструє, що насправді потрібно Росії. Вони хочуть тільки війни і тільки жертв. Саме тому жодного дня не можна втрачати, треба тиснути на Москву, треба примушувати Росію до миру. Треба робити і надалі все необхідне, щоб захистити життя і зупинити смерті. І критично при цьому зберегти єдність всіх наших партнерів – Америки і Європи, усіх партнерів у світі, які допомагають. Завтра буду на зустрічі у форматі «Рамштайн». Заплановані також перемовини з партнерами на рівні міністрів оборони та військових командувачів. Міністр оборони України Умєров вже в Німеччині почав перші зустрічі. Ключове для України – продовжити посилювати нашу ППО, дати Україні можливість щонайменше відігнати від наших міст, від наших кордонів російську військову авіацію. Це реально, якщо партнери зараз все ж таки реалізують домовленості, про які ми з ними давно говоримо. Я вдячний кожному, хто допомагає Україні. Звичайно, ми будемо обговорювати з партнерами і те, як наші оборонні коаліції продовжують працювати у 2025 році. Європа має тільки один вибір. І це історичний вибір. Стати сильніше, стати самостійніше, більше покладатись на себе. Треба бути дорослими у цьому світі і бути готовими зробити свій європейський внесок у глобальну безпеку. Це буде правильно для всіх у Європі. Доповідав головком Сирський сьогодні по наших далекобійних ударах, по роботі нашої армії проти російської військової логістики, їхніх військових об'єктів. Я вдячний кожному нашому воїну за влучність. Сьогодні я провів кілька міжнародних розмов. Молдова має Санду. Звичайно, що найголовніше – це допомогти Молдові пройти складний період енергетичних викликів, не дати Москві розпалити соціальну напругу. Вся теперішня енергетична ситуація в Молдові, і в тому числі на лівому березі Дністра, це намагання Росії зманіпулювати енергоресурсами проти влади в Молдові. Ми готові допомогти Молдові, зокрема вугіллям. Дуже важливо зберегти стабільність, дати всім людям в Молдові умови, щоб жити спокійно та працювати на свою країну, на подолання бідності та на спільний наш рух в Євросоюз. Я говорив сьогодні з еміром Катару. Подякував за підтримку наших гуманітарних зусиль, за участь в реалізації пунктів формули миру. Зокрема, це стосується повернення українських дітей, вкрадених Росією, обміни полонених. Маємо звільнити всіх наших людей. Звичайно, говорили і про наявну глобальну ситуацію, обмінялись поглядами на можливі зміни. Щойно я говорив із спадкоємним принцем Саудівської Аравії, подякував за підтримку нашої держави, за нашу взаємодію. Ми працюємо на всіх рівнях, щоб забезпечити Україні якнайбільше можливостей. Це можливості не лише для нас, а для всіх, хто цінує мир і людське життя. Слава Україні!
And Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. But very interesting to hear, before we actually move on to the second segment, that he was talking about providing coal to Moldova. Because I'm going to share with y'all an interesting fun fact. Did y'all know that the first place in the world where people discovered coal was actually on the British Islands during the time of the Romans? Did y'all know that?
No, did not know that.
You didn't? Well, did you know, Matthew, that at the time they did not know that you could actually use it as a source of heating? They thought it was some sort of a rare, precious stone or a gem, and they would actually carve it into being a special kind of a jewelry of a sort for the people of the city of Rome. They'd actually import the rocks, well, the coal rocks, all the way from Britain to Rome and then carve them in the jewelry, and it wasn't called coal, it was actually called jet.
No, I definitely did not know that. But did you know that we have some more breaking news coming out about the California fires? Would y'all like to hear some fire news? Because we're currently getting some pretty big stories coming out about that. And since we are in the question segment now, we are now covered all of our Ukraine and geopolitical news. It might be time to cover some fire news before we're getting our super chats.
And so let's see if we can get into some of that news, Matthew. I'm actually moving into our Twitter right here really quickly to make sure that we can show a little bit extra of what's going on. So go ahead, please, by all means. I think you're going to be the one largely leading us through this segment because you've been the one able to collect the news, and I've been trying to cover the news that we've had so far. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into what we have about our fire news in Los Angeles. Currently, I believe all the fires are still raging. There was a report we said earlier about the Sunset Fire being extinguished. To my knowledge, that fire is not totally extinguished. It has been controlled to a certain extent, but it's not extinguished all the way. But the Kenneth Fire, which is the newest fire that just started around Los Angeles, actually in the middle of the day today, it turns out that fire was actually an arson. It's been confirmed to be an arson by the police. They're investigating it, and one person is in custody. And we're getting some images that are coming out on Twitter, allegedly showing somebody who's been taken into custody. It's unclear if that is the individual that is the arsonist, alleged arsonist that is. It's unclear what this guy did or if this is even the guy. But there's a picture right there coming out on the news here of allegedly the guy that they've taken into custody. So we're not really sure if this is the actual guy. I want to make that clear, like perfectly clear. We're not sure if this is the guy, but that is currently the story we're hearing. So it sounds like the Kenneth fire was started somehow, and it looks like civilians actually took the guy into custody themselves and then called the police to arrest him. So we do have confirmation of that. So that is pretty much the biggest story we're having at the moment. And also there was a report earlier that a firefighting aircraft collided with a drone over the Palisades fire, and there's a picture of that. It looks like the drone smashed the probably the left side wing or the right side wing, and it looks like it smashed the front of it and caused it to get dented in. So that's quite serious as well. It looks like people are flying drones around the fire sites, and it's impacting some of the first responders. So that's also not good as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the California wildfires are extremely severe. It's very sad to hear that we are getting confirmation that the Kenneth fire was an act of arson, and has been confirmed at this point that it is arson. That is this fire within North LA right here. And I do not even believe that Google has mapped out the exact area of this fire, but it has grown to be quite sizable already. I believe it's covering over 1,000 acres at this point in the area. And we can see that the Eden fire, crazily enough, this is what is wild to see, is that the Palisades fire has actually moved into north of Montana. It's actually just a couple of blocks away from moving into Santa Monica itself. Actually, technically, it already is in Santa Monica. North of Montana is a small suburb of the city of Santa Monica. So technically, the fire is in Santa Monica at this point, as well as the fire consuming Altadena, and getting very close to Pasadena, where a lot of people know that the Parade of Roses is held every single year, which is a pretty big event, and is a major parade in that area of the United States. It's somewhat equivalent in size and scale to the Macy's Day Parade that's held in New York City, but which is for a completely different holiday, by the way. But still, the fires are ravaging literally everything. In fact, it appears that the fire has actually moved into the Jet Propulsion Laboratory within the area of western Altadena, and is most likely destroying critical NASA facilities, as well as other research and development facilities that were within that area. So that's also very unfortunate to see as well, that these fires appear to be completely out of control and are causing extreme damage to the surrounding areas. And we've also heard that there is most likely going to be a significant loss of life, as 6 have already been confirmed dead, and we are also understanding there's probably many more bodies that have not been found yet that will also be reported later on as the fire continues to burn. So it's a very unfortunate thing. It's very sad to hear, and we can see that the entirety of LA, if I can get this map to work with me here, and I'm going to just refresh it so that way we can get it. Still not really working right, but pretty much the entire city of LA is covered in a thick cloud of smoke right now from the Eden fire particularly, which is filling the city with this acrid smoke of the fires of the residential buildings in Altadena, as well as the fires on the mountainsides themselves. It also appears that the Mount Wilson Observatory has most likely been burned to the ground as well, at least from what we're seeing on the map, because it has already moved over the mountain ridge and is beginning to move into the wilderness in the Angeles National Forest. So these fires are just absolutely horrendous. Go ahead.
And that smoke is getting so thick out there too. They're having problems with breathing quality. It's getting that thick and that serious. But also, Enforcer, I sent you a link to the California fire map. It actually shows you a live view of the fires from a satellite image here. So if you want to take a look at that, that gives us a clear idea of where these fires have actually spread to. But on the streets, though, there's been a lot of independent reporters and citizen reporters showing us a view from the street where these places have burned down. And I don't think the mainstream media is doing it justice at this point. If we were able to get a video from the ground, I think y'all would understand what we mean. But the streets are completely devastated. It looks like actually worse than a hurricane going through these areas where the fire is already ravaged. These places have been leveled to the ground down to the foundation, and it looks like the apocalypse, like a nuclear bomb hit the place or something like that. It is that severe. So these fires have been extremely devastating. I don't have an estimate of what the exact cost or the estimated cost of this fire has been to the city of Los Angeles, but I would imagine it's probably up in the hundreds of billions at this point as the fire has gotten into more populated areas. But they seem to be setting off left and right. Now we have a confirmed arson with the Kenneth fire, which is obviously way, way back behind the mountain there, back toward Burbank and also Thousand Oaks. And that fire right there was started by allegedly an arsonist. But Enforcer, let's see the fire map here and take a look.
So it appears that the largest fire still is the Palisades fire at 20,000 acres now, and it appears that it's starting to move down the coast and towards the town of Malibu, directly threatening Malibu with complete destruction from the fire's blazes. It appears that the Kenneth fire has already eaten up an entire subdivision just to the west of Calabasas, and we can also see that a large majority of Altadena has been eaten by the fires in the Eaton fire as well, and it appears that a large area of downtown Altadena has also been destroyed by the fire as well. It does appear, however, that on this map, the Jet Propulsion Laboratories have not been directly affected yet by the fire. The Google Maps are showing that it's actually within the fire's area, but it appears that this map is showing that it has not been affected yet. Still, it does look as though these fires are going to continue to burn wildly out of control. Let's go check on the Hollywood fire and see what it's doing. So it appears, very fortunately, that the Hollywood fire pretty much stopped in its tracks. Doesn't look as though it's burned down any buildings for that matter. It did scar this area of the hillside, but beyond that, it literally missed every single one of the buildings down here on Curson Avenue, and it also avoided Hollywood itself. So that was very lucky to see for Hollywood. It appears that fire has largely been defeated at this point, but we are seeing that there has been 5 fatalities. Around 30,000 acres so far has been burned, a decent amount of that being urban areas. There are around 13,000, actually around 14,000 total emergency responses happening right now, and roughly more than 10,000 structures have been destroyed, which is a significant number. I do not even know how many, let's go see how many structures are in Avdiivka. Let's see here. How big is Avdiivka? Unfortunately, I can't get you all the size of the city of Avdiivka, but I would assume that it's far less than 10,000 structures, probably somewhere around 6,000. But let's see. Let's see. I cannot, unfortunately, find the amount of buildings that were destroyed. I do know that most of them were. Let's see. Hang on here. Wait a minute. I may actually be able to find that here. Dang. Actually,
and also,
no.
Also, Enforcer, while you're looking for that, just to cover another piece of news while I'm thinking about it, and also while I was reminded about it by a viewer, the California National Guard has been deployed to the fire zones. That was announced earlier today, about 5 hours ago, and they were deployed to actually assist the law enforcement because apparently the looting has gotten really out of control at this point. There have been videos coming out on social media of people filling up bags of stuff from people's homes that are catching on fire or are about to catch on fire, and they've been evacuated. And it looks like people are stealing stuff out of the homes, and the police are getting those reports. They're having to respond pretty much all over the city to stop that. And of course, now we have the police reports of arson attacks happening as well. We did see last night on the stream, there was an arson attack that we saw live on camera that I believe it was Dr. Huberman got on camera, and he posted that to X, and we saw it last night. Some guy setting fire to something around the city of Los Angeles. So basically, this is turning from not only a fire situation, it's turning into a civil unrest situation as well. And pretty much everybody knew that was coming, but it looks like it's getting out of hand in the recent day or so. And it looks like they're expecting it to get worse out of hand because now they're calling in the National Guard. And we just saw a massive police presence going down the highway in Los Angeles. I'm not really sure what that police presence was about, and I'm trying to see here if I reposted that bit. I don't think I did repost that article. Let me go see if I can get that one real quick, because there was a massive line of LAPD going down the highway heading toward downtown Los Angeles for some reason, and nobody really knew why. But let me go see if I can spot that and Enforcer, and we can actually show that live on the air.
And while you're trying to find that, really quickly, I saw someone bring up something earlier. I'm actually going to have to address this one outright because it is something that is being falsely stated, is that the city of Los Angeles does not have groundwater to work off of for their fire hydrants because they diverted all of their water to protect some fish called a smelt. That is untrue, markedly untrue, because I've been talking to folks that know about the situation going on in LA, and the groundwater levels have actually returned back to their normal, I guess you could say, stasis sort of a level before there was any major water consumption in the area because of water conservation efforts in the city of LA. The reason why fire hydrants are coming up with no water is because underground, inside of the water system, there are electrical pumping stations that work off the city's electrical grid to be able to pump the water to be able to create any form of pressure within the system. Fire hydrants do not work off of water just sitting there. The water has to have some form of pressure behind it for it to be able to be used inside of the fire hydrants. In some of these areas, specifically in the Palisades fire, the fire actually knocked out the electrical grid, and for this reason, the underground pumping stations within that area ceased to function, and for this reason, there was no pressure in the system for the fire hydrants to actually function properly. So for that reason, that's why there are reports that fire hydrants are coming up with no water. It's not that the city of Los Angeles is inherently deficient of any water supplies. Just to let you know, the obvious trait of that would be that there would be massive sinkage happening, which is where the groundwater levels are no longer existent, and so the ground actually starts to compress under the weight of the city above and begins to sink. We actually have seen this before. It actually is something that the Ruhr Valley area in Germany is endlessly dealing with, because if it wasn't for the massive system of pumps that Germany has in the Ruhr Valley would quite literally sink into a marsh, and it would be filled with water. So that's largely what we would know would be happening with LA, is that if the water table was ever completely depleted, for some reason the city would start to sink. We have not seen that, and of course, from what we've heard, the water levels largely have returned back to normal. The problem is that the pumping stations went out because of a lack of electricity available from the grid, which had gone down, especially in the Palisades area, and that's why many hydrants were coming back as void of water, is because there was no pressure in the system to actually push the water up and into the hydrants for the hoses to be able to function. So that was the primary issue, just to make sure that we clear that up for everyone, so that way people aren't thinking that the city of LA doesn't have water. I was out there, and I can promise you all they have water. We had water when we were in LA. If there was no groundwater, because just also for all of y'all to know, the city of LA does not have any natural freshwater reserves of a large enough size to actually support the city organically, like a freshwater river. All of the water in the city of Los Angeles used for residential, industrial, or commercial purposes has to be sourced from the groundwater taps. If the groundwater had been completely depleted, nobody would even have drinking water in the city of LA before this fire broke out. And that is already markedly untrue. There would be people dying of thirst if they didn't have water in LA in the tap. Plenty of people, millions of them, are drinking out of the tap every day, so they do have water in the ground reserves. It's just that the pumping stations did not work. So I wanted to make sure to put that out there, because I saw some people saying some stuff about Los Angeles lacking water at all in the ground reservoirs because they diverted water for the smelt, and that's just untrue. I'm not trying to get into the weeds or into anything political there. That's just untrue. But anyways, with that, I do believe that Matthew has what we are looking for. So let me really quickly move this over. Also, Matthew, do we need to mute the audio?
Yeah, I haven't listened to the audio, so you might want to just mute it.
All right, so here is the massive police presence that we were seeing moving down. Let's see, do we have a highway here? It's around downtown Los Angeles. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact highway, but here it is.
Just a ton of police cars heading to something. We don't even know what they're heading toward. Like, we were not able to figure out what this was about. But obviously a humongous line of police cars going somewhere, which caught the attention of some are you okay over there?
Yeah,
What was that?
I'm good. Sorry. It was just a cough that came on out of the blue.
Oh, okay. I thought it sounded like something else coming across my mic. It didn't sound like a cough. It sounded like you going, help. I was like, what? I was like, what happened? But we don't even know what this was about, though. But here, clearly a very massive police presence. And we'll have to wait for more detail on it to figure out what this was. But it looks like some cameraman was nearby and he was able to catch it on camera. So we'll have to wait.
And so that's very interesting to see. I wonder what that is there for. Also, I saw someone else say, why don't they use water towers in LA? They do. But once again, much like any other water system, it requires an electrical pump at the bottom of the water tower to be able to pump water up into the reservoir on top of the water tower. And then that's also used to maintain pressure. But at the same time, most of LA just operates off of the electric pumps underground. So if those go out, the system is without pressure. So that's kind of, once again, that's a major crux of the issue. And not only that, water towers only have so much water in them, and the amount of water that we understand that was being being used to try and fight the Palisades fire was so significant from so many different engines that some of the few water towers in that area may have been exhausted of their water very quickly, and that's why we heard at the beginning of the firefighting efforts that there was water available, but as the firefight went on, the waters ceased to exist in most of these fire hydrants. There were no pumps to continue to keep pressure in the system, and the few water towers in the area most likely had been exhausted of the available water that was maintaining pressure in the system. So that's largely what we're dealing with right now. But also, I just want to make this clear because I see some people making this political. I'm not at all trying to say that anyone who made that statement is an idiot or a fool. I am just saying, however, that that information is false given the information that we're getting from the ground. There's a lot of false information going out right now about this. People are saying that the federal government is to blame. Some people are saying that the city of Los Angeles is to blame. Some people are saying that the governor is to blame. Largely, just to be honest with you all, this is a blameless situation. It appears that this is a bunch of opportunistic, at least in terms of the Kenneth fire, and I think at this point, it would be easy to extrapolate that maybe all of these are a reoccurring pattern. It may be a band of arsonists traveling around the city setting these fires. And therefore, the city of Los Angeles is completely helpless to have done anything to stop this fire in the first place, much less put it out, considering that the conditions that they started these fires in were quite honestly the worst conditions that a fire could have ever started under. I have talked personally to firefighters that I know, and they told me that there is absolutely nothing that could be done in a scenario like this. It is the perfect storm. There is no one to blame in this scenario. No one in any political camp. The governor of California isn't to blame. The mayor of Los Angeles isn't to blame. The president of the United States isn't to blame. The president-elect of the United States is not to blame. No one is to blame for this. This appears to just be a old classic tragedy, like you've ever seen one. It happened. People can hardly deal with it, no matter what the situation was. No one can really deal with it. And now we're just having to suffer the consequences of what's happening. So that really is what's going on here. So I want to make sure that no one thinks I'm trying to turn anything political here, because to be quite honest with y'all, this is the most apolitical disaster that's ever been seen so far, from what I understand from folks I've been talking to that are firefighters. There's quite literally no one to blame in this scenario. It's just an unfortunate event. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, or at least address what those statements were being made in the context of. And also, I saw someone say, "How can anyone make a fire political?" Believe me, if you're roaming around the internet right now, I would say like 60% of people who are paying attention to this fire are trying to make it political somehow. Let me go through some of the possible things. A certain political group doesn't like the people living in LA, so they're trying to kill them. God's punishing LA. The mayor is incompetent. They went out and started the fires themselves. I mean, there's literally a million different people blaming anyone and everyone right now, depending on their political affiliation for the fire, which is insane to me. I don't know why people don't just focus on fighting the fire and supporting the folks who are fighting the fire and the folks who are having to run from it. And, if they want to get political later. But right now there's people being burned alive and people who are running for their lives right now. So it's probably better to go focus on what's physically in front of us instead of trying to come up with all of this abstract stuff on the sides that doesn't really do much to help save people's lives or help to fight these fires. It just continues to fuel division in the country, which is what our adversaries are looking and craving for, and maybe even what some of these arsonists are craving as well. But with that, I hope that addresses that the best we can, but we do also have a poll right now on these fires and what the cause of them is, because LA authorities are investigating the most recent fire, the Kenneth fire, as an arson. And a lot of people are putting in their thoughts about this, and it seems as though a lot of people are thinking that it's a troublemaker. Some are thinking it's a foreign actor. Some people are thinking that it may be a mistake. That's a very small percentage of folks, but still, let's see, someone said nobody is burning alive. 6 people have, so I would say that that's largely false, because we already have a casualty report for this fire and there's 6 people dead from it. So right now it's safe to assume someone out there could be burning to death or could have burned to death, and we just haven't found their remains yet. So that would be that'd be highly misinformation. Will say that no one's burning alive because people already have burned to death, and the city has been able to confirm that. So with that, Matthew, what are people thinking about this?
All right, so on this poll right here about the recent fire being apparently declared an arson and with one person in custody, what are your thoughts about that? So 45% said it's likely a troublemaker, aka a domestic terrorist, while 33% said it's likely a hostile foreign actor, and only 5% said it's probably a mistake. And also, the story that we're getting currently is that apparently citizens spotted the alleged arsonist trying to set the fire, and they apparently were the ones to actually take him down. And then they called the police, and then the police arrested him. So that is the story going around. And we do have an alleged picture, and I want to say this. That person right there is simply being shown as the guy on camera that allegedly did it. But take that with a grain of salt. We don't even know if that image is accurate, so take the image with a grain of salt. But honestly, based on this being an arson, I have a hard time believing this is just some nut roaming around, Thousand Oaks that wanted to set fire to something, especially in the area which they set the fire. I would tend to believe, honestly, this is a bit of a leap of faith making this conclusion here. I think it could be a hostile foreign actor doing this because the fires are spreading in places that they really should not be spreading, in my opinion. And of course, I'm no fire expert, but they are jumping to places where the wind is not even blowing. And that sounds to me like maybe a concerted effort to start the fires. But once again, there's not much evidence to back that up yet, except for this one fire being declared an arson. So I'm with the 32%, but sadly, I will have to admit, I don't have much to back it up. It's kind of a hunch at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, once again, it most likely is some form of a troublemaker, possibly, although there may be some sort of a foreign connection as well. Nevertheless, it does appear that one of these fires is deliberate. It's starting to throw into question whether the other ones were also deliberate as well. But it, of course, is obviously a troublemaker. But depending on what the police investigation discovers, it may turn out that it was some sort of a foreign actor. Although I don't want to go and immediately say it was a foreign actor, because then we're going to sound like the North Koreans here on this channel, like we blame everything on one group. It may just be that this is a group of lunatics conducting arson attacks, but usually when we talk about a group of people doing something, they're doing something with a purpose for another larger group. So at this moment, not entirely sure. I would actually have to say I'm a little bit unsure and undecided because it could be a troublemaker or it could be a hostile foreign actor doing this. It's really hard to tell. But also, I was able to find some clips here really quickly of the fires in LA today, and very interesting ones, as a matter of fact, that we can show. This appears to actually be the fire in Altadena, in the Eaton fire right here in this clip, and I'll show it to y'all here really quickly.
Bro, real life apocalypse in California. Everything is burning.
Also, be cautious with the audio, by the way. We don't know what this guy's really going to say.
You guys, it's like a...
Yeah, we're going to mute that. We're just going to show the destruction instead. Because you never know. You never know. But we can see that there's a large amount of buildings still on fire and destroyed in the middle of Altadena.
Just destruction galore. It's just insane. I think that Bank of America right there was actually on fire at one point. I saw a video of one that looked just like it, burning from the top of the building.
Yeah, I think it actually was. It's just horrific to think that this is the middle of Altadena.
It's just hard to believe that's an American city that looks like that right now because it just looks like, literally, like you said, like the apocalypse. And
oh, hey, look, there's
that
Aldi. Yeah, there's the Aldi so this is certainly in the middle of Altadena, because we actually found that store the other day, and there is the Aldi right there. So this guy right now is driving down the road. So hang on, we can actually follow this guy all the way down the street. So let's see if I can get to the starting point here, and we can start this whole clip over and show y'all it again. So let me see if I can find that building that was in that picture there. So that appears to be it. Nope, we need to go further up the street. So is this the building? Yep, that's the building. So he actually started his trip from right here. This is where he was on the street. So this is what Altadena looked like before the fire, right here. So now we will show y'all him driving down. So this area down the street here past this building, that's what it looked like normally before the fire. So, major difference. Of course, it looks like hell. Here it actually looked pretty decent. But as he moves further down the street, we're going to move to the next intersection here and wait for him to move down to it. So he's moving down the street. You see a fire marshal passing by, it seems. We see all the buildings were destroyed around. He's now making it to this intersection. We can see that this building over here, which appears to have been an Easy Stop food store, had burned to the ground right there. So that building ceased to exist. We can also see that practically all the other buildings down that street right here ceased to exist as well. Most of them burned to the ground. And then as we move further on down the street, we can see that both of these buildings, he's about to pan the camera by here in a second, both of these buildings, you can actually see the archway there on that one, burned to the ground completely. The walls caved in, and there's only the external walls, a few of them standing left. So then he passes by that, and then the building right next to that, adjacent here, which was, what was that building? It was a insurance broker's building. How symbolic, I suppose. But it was completely burned to the ground. I wonder if the insurance company will be making a claim on their own building. I suppose they will be denied under the normal claim policies right now. But anyways, see them passing by. Of course, more buildings destroyed. Let's see. We can see. Let's see. Unfortunately, I don't know what that store was, but it is burning to the ground. We can see the Bank of America building right there next to it. So we're going to move a little bit further down. There's the Bank of America building right there. There's the Chase Bank building right there as well. So we're starting to move on down towards the next intersection near this Everett store and the Jack in the Box. So we're going to allow the video to keep on going a little bit further.
You said Jack in the Box?
It looked to be a Jack in the Box. Yeah, it's a Jack in the Box.
Interesting. They're called Jacks down here. The Jack in the Box. That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess it's a different naming convention for the different regions, but we can see that the Everest Charbroiled Burgers was burned to the ground, along with the Jack in the Box. Really, everything surrounding this intersection, including these buildings, was burned to the ground, which we can see right here.
You know, the good news, at least, Enforcer, on a positive note, the U.S. Air Force, if y'all haven't heard this yet, the U.S. Air Force has been deployed to California. They're actually sending about 8 C-130 aircraft equipped with water drop capabilities, and they'll start arriving tomorrow. And those are pretty large aircraft where they can hold a lot of water, of course, and those will start arriving tomorrow. I think the first 4 will be there tomorrow, and then the rest will be there the day after that. So the Air Force is finally getting involved with it, so it looks like the feds are helping out also.
Interesting. That's great to hear. I actually heard that earlier in the day. I believe something like 8 C-130s are being deployed that have firefighting abilities on board, which is significant because C-130s are massive aircraft. We've already seen some of them involved in the firefighting efforts right now, but it'll be great to have an additional 8 of them on site. Also, Ms. Disa just said that the damage and economic loss is now close to 135 to 150 billion. Now meaning that this fire has created more damage in LA than we've actually provided to Ukraine in military and economic support over about 3 years of war. This has happened in only 72, well, not even 70, yeah, it's about 72 hours at this point, actually. So in 3 days, more damage has been caused to LA than we provided to Ukraine in military support in 3 years, to give an idea of the damage and the scale. But we can see them passing through this intersection here, completely destroyed.
Not to be morbid, but do you think it's possible this fire might actually be the first $1 trillion fire the country's ever seen? Because I don't think we've ever had one to cause that much damage.
I think the biggest one before this, it caused $19 billion of damage, and that was the Camp Fire in 2018. So I don't know if this will become the first $1 trillion fire. There's been $1 trillion hurricanes, but I don't know. I don't think this will turn. I think this might end up being like 500 billion or 600 billion or something along those lines. But hopefully it doesn't end up becoming $1 trillion, because that's going to be a death knell to Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is a major part of the nation's economy, whether people like to think about that or not. But we can see here that the Aldi is still on fire. It appears that the majority of the external walls are still standing, but still, it's mostly burned to the ground. We can see the church beyond that, still largely standing. Most of the trees in the actual park itself largely untouched by fire, which is pretty miraculous. But we can see the firefighting truck still here trying to fight the fire at Aldi. We have seen that some of the windows have bursted and the frames have warped into the building from the heat.
I wonder what kind of secondary effect this is going to have on the economy, like outside of the direct damages that were caused, like, for example, of 130 to 150 billion. I wonder for the buildings that are still insured, because even though it's hard to get insurance right now in California, and a lot of people were canceled, last summer, there were still a lot of places insured. So I wonder if this is going to have the secondary effect of causing some insurance companies to actually fold under due to the massive amount of damage that's being had.
I would hope not, but it probably is the case that there's going to be some decent economic fallout from this kind of a fire. Hopefully not. Maybe. Well, no, that's not the case, because there's no insurance claims being made for people to rebuild. Because if people were getting insurance claims and were getting the money to be able to rebuild, this would actually be a bit of an economic stimulus, interestingly enough, because there would be a lot of construction going on, and that would be beneficial for the economy. But there is going to be no rebuilding because there's no insurance policies to make claims for to rebuild any of this stuff. So this might just end up being an economic sink for California and LA. But this also came from Santa Monica, and I believe, Matthew, that we actually saw this building right here in this clip because of that little curved
Yeah, I
area.
think you did.
Yeah, I believe this is on a street we were on, and we could see a firefighting plane dropping water in Santa Monica in the area north of Montana, just off to the side of the street to the north, and we can see that right here.
Very close drop.
This is just horrific to see.
You know what's also wild is there's actually quite a few famous people whose homes have burned down in this area, and they've all like pretty much shown their homes after the fact, and they're just like literally leveled to the ground. It's really crazy. I mean, like notable people have been run out of the area because of the fire creeping up on their house.
Who are some of these people?
There was some comedian woman. I don't really know her right off the bat, but I saw a video of her leaving her house. I think her name is Whitney. I don't know her last name. And also there was this fellow named James. I think it's James Green. I don't know these people personally, by the way. I just saw the videos of them coming out. But yeah, several houses have been taken out of famous people. Also, a few streamers' houses have been taken out as well. Some pretty notable streamers that do gaming as well.
Wow, that's wild. That's crazy to hear. I hadn't heard that so far. But we can also see that the National Guard is deploying. We can see the police making arrests in the streets. I've also heard, I believe, that there is a curfew in place in some areas of LA right now. So it appears that they're trying to get control of the situation on the civil side of things, considering that some people are taking advantage of the chaos to loot and conduct more arson. We can see that they're finally beginning to arrest people, which this is wonderful to see, because hopefully this will start to bring the city a little bit further under control.
And also someone said it was James Woods, not James Green. So that tells you I don't know my celebrities at all. Also looks like Will Rogers' mansion was destroyed according to David Tablet. Let's see here. Some people were saying somebody named Paris Hilton lost their house. That must be like the heiress to the Hilton Hotel chain, I would imagine, based on the last name.
Tom
Someone
Hanks
said Tom
lost
Hanks.
his house.
I haven't heard about Tom Hanks. I don't know about that one. I don't know about Tom Hanks. Have you gotten confirmation on that one?
I haven't. That's the first time I've heard it. But I wouldn't doubt it because from what I generally know, I think his house is somewhere around there. But we can see the National Guard showing up in the MATVs into LA. It doesn't appear that any of the vehicles are armed. Of course, that's usually how they're deployed in these kinds of situations. And we can also see more National Guard convoys moving into the area. So it does appear that the area is falling into a state of emergency entirely at this point. The National Guard's being called out. We also understand that the actual U.S. Armed Forces are going to be involved in the situation, at least the Air Force and firefighting efforts. And it also appears that police are being mobilized pretty much across the entirety of the city to try and crack down on the rash of crime that's now breaking out in the middle of the chaos. So it does seem also that that's some news from Russia. But beyond that, does seem as though the situation is continuing to be a pretty strenuous one, to say very little about it at this point. It's pretty much a disaster from hell, as far as we can tell, for the entire city of LA, which is a terrible thing. But let's see here. Actually. Someone apparently there's been a report from the Office of the White House claiming that the fire will be estimated to cause around $800 billion in damage by the time the fire's done. So that's just based off of the current estimate. So it could be a little bit higher than that. It could be lower. There's a margin of error in those kinds of numbers. But this sounds...
That means they're expecting the fire to ravage a hell of a lot more of the populated areas. That means they're expecting it to go down there. You know what's interesting is they won't tell anybody that. Like, they won't tell anybody the predictions. But apparently the predictions are showing it going down into the populated areas even further. So, you know, I don't think they want to tell the public that to freak anybody out and also to, you know, cause pessimism, but it sounds like it's going to get worse.
Well, they're probably not wanting to say that because that would cause mass pandemonium, hearing that their area will most likely be burned to the ground in time, and then that you'll see that a load of people start hitting the streets. And you can't, the thing with this kind of emergency control situation is that they kind of have to hold back that information a little bit because people are going to panic. Like any rational person hearing that they're going to be in the line of the inferno is going to freak out a little bit preemptively, and they're all going to pack up and leave. So if it's going to cause $800 billion of damage, it's already caused $100 billion. It's affected about 300,000 people who have evacuated so far. So if we're now hearing that it's going to cause $800 billion, this means it's going to be affecting well over 1 million or 1.5 million people, most likely that are going to be evacuated from the fires, and the fires may consume their homes. So if 1 million people hit the streets in Los Angeles at the same time right now and try to leave because they're going to hear that they're possibly in the line of fire, they are going to create a horrendous situation. And imagine the kind of chaos that would be caused by that, Matthew. People are going to be stabbing each other, shooting each other, trying to leave. It's going to be a horrendous situation. So it's better to keep the actual path of the fire on the down low and just issue evacuation orders, mandatory ones, when the fire starts getting closer to those people. So that way the amount of people leaving at any individual time is manageable, and you're not having 5,000 people cram out at the single door to a restaurant to try and get out, and then all of them get killed because they can't leave.
Well, it actually happened earlier. Actually, they accidentally pressed the evacuation warning button, apparently in the emergency control center for Los Angeles, and they sent out a warning to literally every single phone in LA County that was telling them all to get ready to evacuate and get ready to leave immediately, which turned out to be completely false. Someone accidentally pressed the wrong button, and that happened in another fire, I believe down in Hawaii as well. I think somebody did that also.
No, that was a nuclear. That was a nuclear alert.
That was
Remember,
right. That was a
the
nuclear
ICBMs
situation.
were coming in.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my God. Yeah, I remember that one now. They said that the ICBMs were coming in from a foreign country and it's time to get ready to go or something like that. So it was another massive blunder. And everybody was worried for a minute that mass panic was about to set in due to that false alarm. But luckily, it looks like not too many people got in their cars and started jamming the streets up. Some people did. And I think some people left believing that maybe it was some type of conspiracy, that they were trying to keep people there, even though the real warning went out. Conspiracy theories are on the loose like wild these days. But thankfully, it didn't cause much panic, thankfully, though. So seriously speaking, I'm glad it didn't. But that was a stupid blunder to make, by the way. Really dumb.
What probably happened is probably an app that they have where they can issue that kind of a warning, and so they got on the app and they accidentally clicked the wrong one. Instead of it being localized areas, it was just like LA County, and they clicked that and they're like, yeah, that looks like it works, and they didn't pay attention, and then they click send, and then it sent it out to everyone in LA County, which is pretty messed up when you think about it, because that was literally the entire metropolitan area that got that message. Leave now, the fire's gonna kill you. Like, I'm surprised that didn't devolve into literal chaos at that point in the whole city. Huge credit for everyone in LA for keeping some composure there, because it could have gone a lot worse, much like it did in Hawaii, because everyone knows how it went in Hawaii when the alert went out and they said ICBMs are coming in, you got 5 minutes. Everyone freaked out. I mean, like it was literal pandemonium and chaos across all of I think it was a single island in the Hawaii island chain. But that was a bad time right there when that happened. But beyond that, hopefully we will be able to see that people are able to get out of the way, because at this point, it doesn't sound like anything can be controlled at all. And once again, we wanted to put this out there because I generally was someone who was believing that there had to have been some level of incompetence for this to be created. But from what we know, this would have happened whether people were competent or not. It appears that they may actually be arson attacks now. So even if they were competent in fire prevention measures, a dedicated arsonist would have been able to create these fires, regardless whether there were very strong safeguards in place or not. And then on top of that, the conditions are the worst that have ever been seen in the weather. And regardless how strong the United States of America is, or how diligent the firefighting department of Los Angeles is, there's no way to be able to fight a fire in these kinds of extreme weather conditions that we were seeing at the start of the Palisades fire and the Eden fire. So there was really nothing that could be done. There's really not a lot that can be done even still to try and control these fires. They are going to spread. And it's horrendous to hear that there's going to be around $800 billion in damage. That's massive. As a matter of fact, that's about the size of about half of the Russian economy that will be caused in damages in Los Angeles, probably by the time this fire is over. So pretty bad. There's no way to put that around than this is horrendous and a national tragedy for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely horrific. Like, honestly, I've been watching it all day. Like, I know I'm
Man, I
not
have been
actually from
too.
Los Angeles. Like, I'm not even from Los Angeles. I'm not from California. In fact, we don't even have any family in California. But I really hate to see any American city going through something quite like this. And yes, Los Angeles has its problems like every other major city. I know people are going to gripe and say, oh, they don't like the leadership. They don't like this. They don't like that. Even if you have a legitimate gripe, like this is terrible to see an American city going through this because there are just normal people trying to live normal lives here that wake up every day, like most of us, and go to work and do things to make a living. And those people's lives are getting disrupted, their homes are getting burned down, and some people have lost everything. They didn't have insurance on their home, and they literally lost every dime they had in their home's value. So it's a really horrific time, and knowing it's going to get worse, and knowing there are more people at risk, and already at least 5 people have died in the fires, and also apparently there's people setting more fires intentionally at this point, according to that one arson that we've seen so far. It's just really disheartening to see, and hopefully it doesn't get too bad. It's already horrific. Hopefully it doesn't get worse than it is.
Also, I'll take a quick time to mention something because I've seen so many people saying this today. It's something I largely, and I do not mean this to be rude at all, but it is something that's coming from a position of ignorance. Someone said, in Europe, houses wouldn't burn like that. We use bricks to build houses, not wood and paper. There's a major difference in between Europe and the United States. Y'all drop dead when it gets up to about 80 degrees in the summer. Y'all start dying because y'all have no air conditioning and the houses are made of brick. People build houses to accommodate the local environment, the local climate. And building houses out of brick in Los Angeles would be suicidal because of the amount of energy that would have to be used to air condition those buildings during the summer, because a brick building is an insulator. Brick buildings insulate heat. That's why y'all use brick buildings all across Europe. It's not ignorant to do that in Europe. It's very smart because in Europe the weather conditions are generally colder most times around the year. So it's better to build a building that is far better at insulation than it is at ventilation. Here in the South and really across the majority of the southern United States all the way to California, including LA, the buildings are built to ventilate, not insulate. So our buildings are built out of lighter materials, so that way it will be far easier to be able to control the temperatures inside and stop the temperatures from rapidly spiraling out of control. And that's why in Los Angeles, they build the buildings out of wood, and they don't build them out of brick. It's the same here in the South. Most buildings in the South are not built out of brick. They are built out of some form of wood or some sort of a light material like that. That's generally the difference. It would actually be pretty goofy for the United States to go, these houses burn because they're in a warm climate, so we're going to build cold weather houses that insulate in Los Angeles, one of the hottest places in America, much like Arizona. And so that way we prevent fires. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be preventing fires, but you're going to be creating an insane energy crisis because these buildings are going to have some of the strongest air conditioning units running endlessly year round to be able to try and cool the insides of them, because they're going to be taking in the heat from outside and insulating the insides significantly. And also, you may see that some people cannot afford that because running air conditioners like that isn't cheap, and then people start dropping dead from heat stroke. You have to build buildings to accommodate the environments they're in, and the buildings in LA were not built incompetently, and they weren't built outside of a building code. They were built according to the stringent fire safety codes and building codes of the United States, but most importantly, they were built, of course, surrounded by a warm environment, and they have to be able to build these buildings to ventilate properly to where people aren't dying of heat stroke like folks do in Europe. The same argument could be made every year when we hear that a couple of dozen people die in Britain from heat strokes. Why do they build their buildings out of brick? Why don't they build them out of wood so that way they ventilate properly? And that wouldn't make much sense because through most of the year, Britain's cold. It's cold out there. We've been there, and even in the summers, when they say it's burning hot, compared to Alabama, it's actually somewhat mild. It wouldn't make sense for them to build a house like we do in the South in Britain because the weather most of the time is far colder in Britain than it is down here. But with that, I hope that answers that fairly well. I mean, I know it's coming from a good place of wanting to improve people's safety, but at the same time, there are also much more practical concerns at play when building in a place like Los Angeles, which is the climate, and having to build according to the climate. So I hope that does answer that well for a lot of people who are wondering why in the world are a lot of buildings in LA built out of wood. That's the answer, and that's largely why. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so that is actually all of our California news that we're going to cover for the moment. That pretty much covers everything we've learned since this morning. And of course, if we want to cover it more detailed, we'll have to cover that probably tomorrow. We'll probably hear some more detail by then. But with that, folks, we are now jumping into our Super Chat segment and our last question segment of the night. And our first Super Chat is going to go to Flash1, who's, of course, a longtime channel viewer as well. Hey. And thank you very much, Flash, for that $20 support and helping to keep us running. We do appreciate it. And Flash said, hello, Enforcers, and hello, Flash. They said, I heard that the ground is frozen in areas in Ukraine and that the ground mines frozen as well, letting vehicles drive over them. And is this possible? And my thoughts go out to all the fire affected people.
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Flash1. Thank you massively for helping this channel to keep on running tonight. And it is true that the ground is frozen in Ukraine for the large part at this point, and so it is making armored warfare possible again. But it will not be for long. The Rasputitsa will be returning soon here in the spring, and then the ground will be pretty slushy, and that usually starts to happen by late February. So, it is entirely a possibility. In fact, it's really the reality at this point, and that's why we're seeing that Russian offensive tempos are beginning to step up again in the Kursk Oblast and in other areas like Kupiansk. It's because the ground is hardened enough for armored activity to continue at a decent pace and for them to start their offensive initiatives at their large scales again. It's because the ground conditions are favorable for that kind of a thing right now. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. Big thanks to you once again, Flash1, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you who enjoyed this channel and went out of their way to support it, we simply would not be able to make this thing possible. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next ones here. Our next super chats are going to go to none other than George and also BC Skyman. And they both put in a $20 donation apiece, but did not leave comments, sadly, so nothing to address. But huge shout out to you, BC, once again, for always supporting the channel and being a channel legend. And shout out to George as well, who's a first-time supporter of the channel and just threw in his first ever super chat. And thank you very much, George, for deciding to support the channel and also to helping to keep us running and on the air as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a massive shout out to BC Skyman and George, old guard and new guard, joining the channel tonight and supporting it and helping it to keep on running. Y'all make it possible for us to cover the massive wide variety of news that we're covering these days, and I gotta thank y'all both so much once again. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but y'all support is significant because it helps us to be able to keep this channel running and keep this kind of news on air. So a massive thanks to both of y'all once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to Uncle Sam's Misguided Child, who's also a longtime viewer. And thank you very much, Uncle Sam, for that $10 support and also helping to keep us on the air. He said, keep sending freedom fractions from the LSA. And Slav Ukraine, God bless our republic, and prayers for Cali.
And thank you so much for the support. And I got to say, it's great to see a lot of folks having patriotic spirits about what's going on in this country because it's really something. And so with that, thank you so much once again for your support. Long live the Republic, and prayers for the folks in California, especially in LA, because they're going through very tough times. And of course, a massive round of appreciation and applause for all those firefighters who, while they're facing insurmountable odds, they literally just cannot contain the fires right now. They are still trying their hardest to be able to fight each and every one of these, pretty much working around the clock tirelessly to try and save the people of LA from a very horrific thing, which is this fire. And that's something that's crazy to me, actually, speaking about the fires, is that some people, I don't know what it is, and this is something that I found interesting, and I haven't seen this in the LSA, but I've been seeing this around the internet today. Some people act like the LA fire, like an LA fire like this just happens, like it happens all the time, and it's not even anything to talk about, which is crazy to me, because it's like, we already knew yesterday that this is the most devastating fire in American history. We already knew that, and it was the most devastating fire in LA's history. So it's like, fires like this don't happen. Like, they have not happened for 249 years in this country's history. And now this thing is certainly the most devastating fire by miles. Nothing is even getting close to it. And it's really been crazy to me how some people have been trying to downplay it. Be like, oh, it's just a brush fire. You know, why even cover it? Like, I've seen comments like that on another channel that's very similar to ours that was covering the fires today. I actually got to say, doing a pretty good job at it, by the way. Like, I mean, I'm not going to act like it's bad. It was actually pretty good coverage. But beyond that, I was seeing some people saying stuff like that, like, it's just a brush fire. This happens in California all the time. It's like Los Angeles doesn't burn down every other year. Like, this is a once in history kind of a thing that's going on right here. And also, mainstream media is doing horrifically at covering this. This may be why some people are thinking it's really nothing. But they'll send someone like Anderson Cooper to go stand in front of one burned house. It's like, get his ass in a Tahoe with the camera and drive around and show how many blocks have been destroyed. Like, that's really how to get the perspective. And I've seen a lot of people on YouTube doing that. Huge credit to the folks covering this on YouTube. A lot of them are doing great work. And I believe Fox 11 also has a helicopter airborne that is showing a lot of the damage. So a big credit to Fox 11, which I believe is a local news station for LA. But some people are just like CNN. I mean, they're just like lost. I haven't seen good coverage coming out from their network at all. I mean, they're like, fires are bad, and I'm like, well, show it. Like, like, don't just show the one burned building. Make sure to show the whole city, because it's bad. I mean, it's horrific. People need to start getting an understanding of what's going on, because I don't think anyone can deny how bad this fire is when you look at a picture of Pacific Palisades and the whole thing was burned to the ground, save like 2 or 3 buildings. Like, let me go see if I can get that picture, because we have it on Twitter, and when you look at the scale of it, it's just unbelievable. You don't even see stuff like this in Ukraine. That's how bad it is. So let me see if I can go find it really quickly. Let's see. We've posted a lot today, man. Jeez. We've been at work on Twitter.
Also, interesting way to find your way around LA is like you have to learn the areas that they're talking about here. I didn't even know where the Pacific Palisades was until we started looking at this fire, and I didn't really know where any of these areas were that they were talking about, except for Hollywood and Beverly Hills. So yeah, it's kind of an unfortunate way to learn the geography of the area, but we've had to do it.
And let's see here. I'm about to be able to find the damage to the Palisades here in a second. I'm actually getting close to it now. Here we go. This is Pacific Palisades. That's what's left.
Ugh.
It's nothing. I mean, it's literally been reduced to rubble. It's like a massive steamroller came through here and just wiped out the whole place. And it's just horrific to see that, because this was a major city, Pacific Palisades. Let me go get you all the population of it. Let's see. Let me go to population. 23,000 people lived here in this town. And in less than a day, it was destroyed, wiped out. And who knows how many people are dead in this rubble right now. It's surely more than 5. Because, of course, they haven't even really been able to survey the area and find remains or really sweep the entire area. So the numbers will be climbing as time goes by. This is a horrendous thing. Like, if the news like CNN would show this kind of stuff to people, instead of standing in front of one burning house, show them the hundreds of destroyed houses, people really will start to get an idea and a picture that this is bad. This has not happened before. And I think some other people are also biased, like some people out there on the internet, so don't listen to them too much. I think some people just hate LA for reasons, like we won't explore the reasons, but for reasons, because someone actually came on the stream last night. They ended up getting banned because they went lunatic, but they were like, oh, the Pacific Palisades burns down like all the time. So I went and pulled up the history of Pacific Palisades fire, and this is the first one. So there is no history of the Pacific Palisades just burning to the ground. This is the first time that this has ever happened. So it's like, I don't know what's up with people trying to mitigate this or make it sound like it's nothing or something like that, because this is the worst fire ever seen in U.S. history, anywhere in the world. It beats the Great Fire of Chicago already with the amount of damage and the amount of area that this has affected. And that's even crazier when you think about that, man. The Great Fire of Chicago was a major turning point in this country for fire safety regulations, and it doesn't even pale in comparison to what this has turned into.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Also, I saw Purple Gerbil asking the live chat. They said, how does this affect the professional sports teams' activities like playoffs and regular games? I believe I heard earlier today, and once again, I'm not a sports person, so I don't keep up with those. I think they moved a football game from Los Angeles. They moved it to an entirely different city due to the fire concerns in the area. So it sounds like they're also moving away like football games and other things like that to make sure that there's no risk at all to the people potentially getting burned by the fires or even the first responders and getting in the way of that. So it sounds like it's affecting everything. Like, it's affecting the sports teams, it's affecting the first responders, and just simply living a normal life. Like, the people can't do that right now. There's just such chaos up toward the fires in Los Angeles. And also, there it is. Victor said the Rams play in Arizona, and that was the game that was moved.
And also, I saw East Malibu say Palisades has survived countless fires, and that's true. It's survived them. It's never been burned to the ground. So that's where my disconnect's coming from. I don't know why some people are trying to downplay. It's like, oh, you know, the Palisades just burns to the ground all the time. It's like, no, it doesn't. It's like, it's never burned down. I mean, you know, like fires have happened around it, but they've always been put out. They've never just seen the whole place burn to the ground, much less Santa Monica. I mean, it's moved into Santa Monica now. It's like we were watching the firefighting aircraft dropping water on the fires in Santa Monica. It's like, this is just, it's never been seen. I mean, it never has been seen before. And so I hope that is it's something that really starts to be harped on a lot, because so many people, not really many, it's a small group, but they really stand out, are really trying to downplay and mitigate this and make it seem like nothing. This is a national emergency at this point with what's going on in LA, and especially the amount of lives being lost. I've now just heard from someone in the chat that the number of officially dead has risen to 10. So there's surely many more out there that have not been found and counted yet. And
well, you saw the Weather Channel was walking around with a camera through the rubble, and they accidentally showed on national television. It looked to be a body in the rubble, and it was very heinous, really, to see it. The person had apparently burned up in the home, and they accidentally showed that on national television. They didn't see it. So they didn't even account for those people that were in the rubble. Like you're saying, that number is probably much higher than that, and it's going to take a long time before the cleanup even starts to get the accurate number.
Yeah, and that person was burned to the bones. Like, that was all that was left, just to give you an idea of the heat of this fire, the severity of it. Like, fire, like, and some people are downplaying this like fires aren't anything. Fires are some of the most dangerous things that affect people. Water, most times water doesn't even end up being this dangerous. Fires are truly a major danger to public safety. It's as bad as a war. That's kind of why yesterday with our coverage, we were treating it like a war, because a major fire like this breaking out in the city, it's a death knell for many. It usually is. It's the destruction of the economy. It's the death of quite a large group of people. It is a tragedy. I mean, it's quite literally a warlike scenario that we're dealing with here, trying to fight this fire. And that's something else that a lot of people don't get, is that the most devastating things most times aren't even wars. It's just fires. Major fires like this are more devastating in the end than the war in Ukraine. Think about this really quickly. Right now, it's been 3 days. This fire has only been going on for 3 days in LA, and so far it's caused about $125 to $135 billion in damage. That is the exact amount of money that we've sent to Ukraine in 3 years. And that's been considered bankrupting by some. I don't know why, because it's not like, you know, the United States is quite literally made out of money. It's not like we're broke or poor or anything. $120 billion stretched over 3 years is a drop in the bucket. But $130 billion in damages in LA in 3 days, that is a voracious amount of destruction. I mean, that's quite literally the amount of money we've sent to Ukraine over 3 entire years. So over 1,000 days, that amount of damage was done in the United States in just 72 hours. In 3 days. It's a horrendous amount of damage. And I just don't know why people don't treat civil emergencies like that as severely as they really deserve to be treated. Fires like this are the worst thing that can happen. I don't
think a lot of people, also someone said the Weather Channel body thing was disproven. If it was disproven, then maybe my eyes deceived me, but I saw a video that came out on Twitter. It appeared to show a body there in the rubble. So maybe I was seeing things, but I'm pretty sure I saw a body. I think the enforcer also saw the video as well.
I mean, it looked like there was a skull, maybe some ribs and a femur. I think that's what I saw. But you know, maybe, I don't know, maybe that was just the eyes playing tricks. I don't know, but it looked pretty convincing to me. It looked like a corpse. Don't we have that on our Twitter, Mandy? I'm not going to show it on stream, but I'll look at it off screen to try and get another off screen.
I don't think I reposted that. I didn't repost it because it was too graphic.
Let's see here. Let me see if I can find it anyways. Let's see here. I mean, I've seen a pretty good amount of corpses in different states because of the war in Ukraine. So it would be pretty hard.
And also, by the way, just confirmation of what somebody told us in the live chat a moment ago. It looks like it's official. The coroner's office says definitely at least 10 people are dead. So they've confirmed that 10 people have lost their lives in the fire. So that is confirmed by the coroner.
That's horrific to hear. That's pretty much increasing the death toll by 40%. Actually, I think that's more like 80% at that point, from 6 to 10. So let's see here. Trying to see. Yeah, I don't think we republished that. But let's see. We did see it somewhere. I think we just saw it on Twitter at large. Sadly, I won't be able to review that right now, though. But anyways, with that, we are going to be continuing on with some more questions.
All right, so our next super chat here goes to Ogre Online, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Ogre Online, for that support. Also, someone here also says, Weather Channel confirms it did not share footage of human remains. Maybe I'm seeing things, or maybe somebody doctored the video, that's possible. So, maybe false alarm, maybe what I saw was not from the Weather Channel, but it appeared to be from the Weather Channel. It looked like it when I saw it on Twitter, so take it with a grain of salt. We'll try to look for it later and see if we can actually find corroboration of that. But I saw what I saw, but we'll have to go back and look. But moving on to this one, back to Ogre Online Super Chat, that $10 support, and thank you very much, Ogre Online, for that support. They said, it's really not that hard to imagine Russia losing to Ukraine because of the Western wonder weapons they have been supplied, and the weapons are so high-tech from the U.S. and multiple Euro countries.
Thank you so much for the support. And what's crazy is that they seem high-tech compared to what the Russians use, but they're actually about 40-year-old pieces of technology we're sending them, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. It's that a lot of people are considering that to be wonder weapons, and it's not even close to what our technological abilities actually allow us to do nowadays in the here and now. But still, I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to keep this channel running and make this thing possible. And so a massive thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because if it wasn't for folks like you who were supporting this channel and going out of their way to help to keep this channel running, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible day in and day out. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Razor58, as well as Michael Mervahill, and also Kevin Borg, the Kiwi. And they each put in a $10 donation and did not leave comments. But thank you very much, Razor, Michael, and also Kevin for that generous support and helping to keep us running as well. And we really do appreciate it. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you to all three of y'all, dang, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but the support is a massive one, and it helps us to be able to make this thing possible and keep it rolling day in and day out. And so I got to thank y'all massively once again for y'all support, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we would not be able to make this thing possible. We wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Burnaby Alex, who's also a longtime viewer and puts in a 10. And Burnaby Alex says, I like to follow these streams to counter the misinformation that my coworker repeats in the office. And I appreciate it when you have verified stories, and take care.
And thank you so much for the support, Burnaby Alex. We try and confirm our stories as best we can. It's good to know that a lot of people use us as fact checkers for misinformation. Some people that do not work off of good info. Largely, whenever you ask anyone any questions and their story starts falling apart immediately, like when they're like, Ukraine's losing. I've heard this many times. Oh, Ukraine's losing. The Russians are beating them. And I'll go, well, how? Well, I mean, they're just beating them. Well, how? I mean, where are they beating them? Well, I mean, they're just beating them. And it's like, well, do you not know the frontline situation? Not really. I just hear that they're beating them. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really mean much, because, anyone could say that. And it's really wild to me that that's the case a lot of the times, that people don't really research a lot of what they're talking about. They'll just repeat stuff that they heard. That's actually what a lot of people do. Usually a lot of people are very low effort with the amount of research they put into stuff. I mean, hell, just look around. I mean, there's a lot of people who do that plain as day. I mean, they put no research into whatever they're talking about. And that's why nowadays, I generally discredit a lot of what people say. That's really been the case before I even started running this channel. And that's really why I don't get into the domestic political sphere, because a lot of people just lie about everything. There's loads of people lying about the LA fire right now in the domestic political sphere on all sides. Some people are saying, they're trying to burn certain kinds of voters to death. And it's like, no. Or they're burning down their property to buy it so that way they can create mega mansions. It's like, but those were the mega mansions. It's like, that doesn't even make any sense. And then there's a whole bunch of things that flip stuff on their head. There's generally just some crazy people out there who don't have information. They're very ignorant. And then they just come up with stuff like the fire. I remember this one. This one was one that just really had my eyebrow furled. The fire in Hawaii that burned down a lot of folks' homes was done so that way I forgot who it was. It was like Oprah Winfrey and a couple of other people. It was like just random celebrities could buy up all the property or something like that. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Because like right now, I think some of their homes are burning down in LA. So it's like, if they have the ability to control fires, why in the world are they not controlling this one? Well, and then of course, people like that are also crazy. So then they'll just find a way to justify, well, they don't want the public to really know that they control fire, so they're going to let these houses burn down that they own, but they're going to buy the ones in Hawaii. It's like, none of that makes any sense. Like, anyone with a rational mind would think that that's just lunacy, and it is. But still, beyond that, that's something that I'm glad to know that people find this channel to be the voice of reason and good information, because there's a lot of bad information that's going out and around right now, and on all sides, mind you. It's not one side or the other. Like, I'm not trying to make this a partisan kind of a deal. It's largely both sides kind of an ordeal. If you listen to one side or the other, you're largely just listening to a crock of lies. I mean, that's really the best way to put it, because I don't hear anything truthful coming out of either side most of the times. At this point, people just say whatever the hell they want to say, whether it's true or not, and people just cling to it because they see the other side lying, but they don't know that their side's lying, but they still believe them mindlessly. It's just it's a horrific conundrum how that's working today. But anyways, with that, let's see. Support. Let's see. They never went anywhere. Yeah, I mean, the internet is an interesting place like that, Scott. I honestly feel like the internet is how the small group of nut jobs. There's not a lot of them out there. I mean, the amount of nut jobs out there is actually fairly small. But on the internet, the small group of nut jobs that exist out there on all ends, they're able to really kind of like unionize almost, and are able to make their voice a lot stronger through the internet. It's really honestly been that way. Since the beginning of history, new forms of media is always the way that nut jobs start to team up together. I mean, hell, the invention of the radio is how the commies and the fascists were really able to get their footing in the early part of the last century. But anyways, with that, what?
I was laughing about the commies using the radio to band together. That's something else.
Well, yeah, it's how they did it. Like, Adolf Hitler's propaganda machine and Stalin's propaganda machine only succeeded because of the radio. Did you know that?
Yeah, I knew that. I was just thinking, imagine if they had two-way radios, like kind of like social media today, like Facebook messages and stuff like that. If they had the two-way radio, it would have been over.
Yeah, it's like, oh. And also someone of course is coming in. Well, one side's more this and the other one's less. No, it's both. It's both, I promise you. I look at it from a neutral perspective. Both of them are pretty equally bad off. Like, I can just promise you that. And then someone's gonna be like, oh, well, you're like the enlightened centrist, aren't you? No, because like the people who are in like the independent camp also fall under like the same category as well. No, like it's all pretty bad off right now. But it's always been like that. Like it's like a mistake to believe that it only became like this because of the internet. No. Bullshit was being spread by the television and the radio well before the internet was even created. I can promise you it's always been like this. It's just that the internet is the new vice of mass information, much like any other medium has been when it's been created. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Herb Derp NV, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Herb Derp, as well for that support. And they said, I saw a video of an Amazon driver attempting deliveries in a burning LA neighborhood. And also there was an LA County FD program in 2018 called Community Fire Brigades that trains the locals to protect their own hoods.
And that's very good to hear. I wish there was a lot more civic initiatives like that around the country, where we would mobilize the citizenry to make sure that they are also a part of fire prevention and also maintaining public order. Because, of course, I'm not saying that everyone has to be deputized to be a police officer, and not everyone's going to be a volunteer firefighter, but it would be good to at least to give a modicum of training to everyone in those kinds of roles, so that way they can fill important positions during states of emergency, because when it comes down to it, the citizenry themselves have to take it upon their own actions to be able to protect themselves from major fires or mass civil unrest. It's really what it turns up to being, especially in the worst case scenarios. So that's very interesting to hear that they had a program like that. And also, let me make sure to reread that super chat really quickly. Make sure that I'm getting everything in it. So let's see here. Let's see here. Where in the world is it?
It was about the Amazon driver
Oh,
doing the
yeah.
deliveries in the burning hood.
I just found it. And yeah, Amazon is pretty strict. Like they have to get the pictures of the packages and everything. Like I don't know if y'all saw that video made by Max Fosh, who is a pretty big YouTuber. I think he's got like a couple of million subscribers, but he's from Britain and he actually ended up getting hired at Amazon. I don't know if you saw this video, Matt. He ended up getting hired at Amazon and was able to get in there for a little bit before they fired him because they found out he was a journalist and he was showing the conditions that they work at Amazon. It's stringent. I mean, the drivers get so little time to be able to even take a restroom break that they usually end up urinating in bottles and then throwing the bottles out of the car while they're driving around because the company doesn't even give them that kind of time off. Transportation things like that usually are pretty stringent, but that's well beyond stringent. That's just getting to draconian. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support. You would think that Amazon would cut some slack, but no, Big Daddy Bezos, he's got to make sure that those packages are delivered to the evacuated peoples that aren't even going to be picking up the packages. But still, with that, thank you once again for support, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Margaret de Velden, who puts in a 10 and says, thank you, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. And thank you, Margaret, for helping to keep us running. And we appreciate the kind words as well. So, Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you so much for the support, Margaret. And thank you for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and also, up next, shout out to Andy L. for putting in the 20. We can't cover the politics, but thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you for the support, and we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Pimp John Paul II. Thank you very much, Pimp John
what the
Paul,
hell?
for the $10 support. A very interesting name there. They say, excellent job at aggregating the news, and keep up the hard work, and you are appreciated. And thanks, Pimp John Paul. We appreciate it. Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Pimp John Paul II, really pimping it out there. And well, I'm not gonna go there. But beyond that, I gotta say that's a pretty interesting name. I gotta thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you so much for enjoying the amount of factuality that we try and put into this and the removal of politics. I like to think that we're not people who drink the political Kool-Aid and always have to look through things through a political lens, because generally that kind of a thing is generally unsavory, and I would say that that's something that this channel just isn't about at all. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Marc-Andre Burnett, who puts in a 7. And thank you very much, Mark, for that support once again. And Mark says, my English is improving every day. And thanks to this channel and the LSA community. And merci beaucoup et bravo pour tout. C'est que vous faites, mes amis. And I just butchered your language, Mark. I'm sorry about that. My English is decent, but I'm not good at that language. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, that's like the man.
The hell?
Man, that's supposed to be like that snoring guy. You know, that guy that goes, oh, you know, that guy.
I thought you were like losing or something. I was like, he snapped. He snapped.
Man, maybe. But beyond that, I gotta say, it's wonderful to know that your language, your English language skills are improving, because I know that my foreign language skills are not improving at all. But I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also thank you for the kind words in your own language, because I did get the last part. It sounded kind of like French. And it sounded like you were saying, my friend. So thank you so much for the kind words in French, if I'm correct. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. Angel Art said he snapped. Oh, but still, with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, Mark said, you were good, Matt. I did it just for fun. And I hope it was fun. I don't know why butchering your language would be a fun thing to you, Mark. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe. Also, by the way, let me do this real quick. Okay, there we go. So, I don't know why butchering a language would be fun, Mark. If it was fun to you, I'm glad, though, because I feel like I absolutely butchered the hell out of that language right there. Is it French? Like, I feel like I'm ignorant in saying that. Is it French? I think it is. Enforcer, do you know what language that was, by the way, in Mark's Super Chat?
That was French, and I would assume by his name, Marc-Andre Brunet, it's easy. Most likely French, I would assume.
Yeah, it looks like French to me, so I'm obviously not good at French. I don't have the VV. I don't have that accent going on. It's much different from French.
Let me go get that super chat. Maybe I can give it a better shot. I'm not saying that I'm going to be better. It's probably going to be as bad. Merci beaucoup et bravo pour tout ce que vous Fati, I'm going to butcher it. I know I'm butchering it. I'm trying to try it a little bit better. I might as well not. Because I'm going to be like one of those people who's like, hello and welcome to Mexico. And it's like, you're not speaking Spanish. Just give up. But beyond that, thank you so much for the support, Marc-Andre Brunette. That is incredibly kind of you. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, I assume that we are on to the next one. I'm going to give a little bit of an address to that, considering that that is something that became a public ordeal, and then we'll move on from it very quickly. So go ahead, Matthew.
All right, so our next one here is going to go to FaZe YN, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, FaZe, for that $5 support. They said, long live the LSA, and thank you for being a non-biased Western-leaning but realist and competent news bringer, and I will continue to support and watch.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because we love to know that we are not political. We're never going to be political, and we're going to make sure to keep this channel up to its inherent core values as the Lee Spring Army. And that's never going to change, no matter how much people want to act like they can change it. The Lee Spring Army will always be what it is. And so with that, I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, I believe, Matthew, that we do have to address something here, if you see what I mean. And also, I see your concerns there, and I can assure you that's not going that way. But considering that that was the second time that something like that has happened with that individual, I have a feeling it would probably be good to address it to many people, considering that a lot of people know that person and will bring up something to do about that. It'll be very quick, and then we'll move on. But Matthew, take it away.
I'm moving on to the next super chat, or you're going to address the situation?
We're going to address the situation. I'm sure I'll just bring it up. I'm sure many of y'all saw that someone just had to go, as we like to put it sometimes, because of a bit of a fallout. It appears that someone just tried to cuss us out that has been here for a little bit on the channel, and I'll quickly catch y'all up to speed so that way some of y'all aren't thinking or maybe hearing that something happened that wasn't supposed to happen. So many of y'all may know of the particular viewer I'm talking about that just got banned, and that is not the first time that there has been a crash out, if you want to call it that, where he's pretty much just told us off and wandered off. He actually did that in private a while ago, about 2 or 3 months ago, and we try and be as political and nice about things as possible, but back then it was fairly aggravating to deal with because it seemed to be an artificial problem that was being created. So recently, while we were covering the California fires the other day, we actually got a private DM from that specific viewer on Twitter telling us that California does not matter and the people of California just no one cares about them, and then the fires are fine and they ought to burn. And so we were like, that's pretty messed up, because those are American citizens and so on. And so now they've decided to take it upon themselves, of course, knowing that the Lee Spring Army is a politically neutral force and that I'm never going to profess a public political opinion, to come onto this channel and try and throw in a super chat thinking that we would be swayed by the money to let that super chat slide and put a comment out like that, knowing that we were clearly going to remove it because it was political. So we removed the comment, the first one that was sent in, speaking disparaging comments about the people of California in general, and most importantly, American citizens. And so then they decided to try and make a public scenario about it, and then try and diss on us for something that we've professed for 3 years, which is that we're politically neutral. And I just want to make this very, very clear to many people. I thank everyone for the support that people give to this channel in the form of super chats, and also all of the other support that people give on Patreon and elsewhere, but we are not going to have our morals bought and sold with cash. You can support this channel with thousands of dollars, but that does not mean that because you support the channel that we're going to get rid of core tenets of our beliefs on this channel and start to say whatever is going to make us the most money. That's never how I've run this channel. That's never how we're going to run it. And also, that was an incredibly rude and very self-centered kind of a thing to try and make the whole scenario about one person and also make it as political as possible, considering that people have died in this incident, and many people are currently grieving right now because their family members are being burned to death. Many people are losing their livelihoods and homes, and these people have multiple different political backgrounds. They have multiple different upbringings, different kinds of lives, and they're all being destroyed right now while we're talking on air. And it's a very kind of a self-centered and sick thing. Honestly, the problem with this country, for that particular person to once again now try and push the situation on air and try and make it a political topic, although we have time and time again told many people that we are not going to make this a political issue, and that this is an issue that is affecting all Americans equally and affecting Americans inside the city of Los Angeles directly. That is something that is incredibly unsettling to me in that particular instance with that person, and I'm going to make sure to put this as politically as possible, ironically, but we will not tolerate that kind of stuff here on this channel, regardless of who the person is. So,
you know, what's unfortunate is I tried to explain, because this has been an ongoing thing in the background, and I don't know why he drug it onto the stream, by the way. And unfortunately, I don't want to discuss this on the stream really, but since we're having to address it at this point, I might as well say a word or two, so that way we explain the situation. He had been saying things like that in private, and I was trying to explain why we shouldn't take positions like that, because honestly, that's a hateful thing to say, that a state should burn because of their politics. That's insane, really, to say that. I try to put it as political as possible, not to attack, because it's a free country. You can believe what you want. If you want to be hateful, you can be hateful. It's not the right thing to do, but you can do it. You have the freedom to be hateful if you choose to be. But to hate an entire state over politics is crazy, because there are normal people just living there that don't care about politics one bit, that simply want to live. So, you really got to check yourself. If you hate an entire group of people and you categorize people all in one pot, then you got to look within yourself at some point and think, am I the one with the problem, or is it them with the problem? Because you should never wish harm on your neighbors over their political beliefs. Even if you disagree with them to the umpteenth degree, you should never wish harm on them, because ultimately we're all Americans, and that's the right way to do it, is to be an American and not wish harm on other people.
And the only reason I'm addressing this, we would not address a situation like this. This would just be a very cut and dry thing. Someone would get banned and they would move on. But I know that many people know this particular viewer because he's been around for a while. I personally did not know that was the kind of person who really did dive into the political Kool-Aid in one direction, and believe that the entire time. I mean, there are people who are very close to this channel that are political. We know that, and they've told us that. But at the end of the day, everyone gets on the stream and they act apolitical, and that's something that I respect a great deal. That's what the Lee Spring Army is really about, is supporting American Western interests, regardless of political affiliation. So it's very disheartening to see that someone who has been a part of the community for a while like that would then go out of their way to try and make a public drama about something that has been dead set on this channel for 3 years. So a little bit unfortunate that happened, but nevertheless, I wanted to make sure to explain that to folks, just in case if you're hearing a different story in the future, because people like that never leave peacefully. Now I'll tell you all what will happen, because this is what's happened for years. Now that person will profess that they are an enemy of the Enforcer channel, and they will swear to destroy the channel, and then they're going to be spreading a million lies to anyone and everyone that they can in the community, telling them that something else happened. So wanted to make sure to beat that one to the punch and get the story out as it's been unfolding for the past few days behind the scenes, because I don't like drama, but if people are going to start drama like that, I'm going to make sure to get the story out these days beforehand, because you just never know how it's going to go. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, so after that unfortunate crash out, we are moving on to our next super chat, and this one goes to Vonchtek Tersi, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Vonchtek, for that support. They said, thank you for reading my message even without the super chat, and also no problem. And they said it was some sarcasm, and I know disinformation in combination with an internet is spreading like wildfire, so let's hope the fires will end soon.
Oh, and it's fine. Every once in a while, we just pick live chat questions to talk about, or live chat comments, because some of them are good, some of them are great, some of them are wild and nuts. There's always an in between. That one was one where I was like, oh no, like because like I'm quite honestly dead set. It's both sides politically that can create some pretty dangerous stuff out there. It's not one side more so than the other. That's my personal opinion. Maybe you disagree, and it is a free country, but that's something I'm very adamant on, because, we just had someone crash out and they're from one side, and then we'll have someone else crash out in a week and they'll be from the other side. It happens like that a good deal. And to be entirely honest, it's not even our first rodeo with that kind of a thing. And what's crazy to us about that, speaking of things like that, is that some people like that, who've been around for at least over a year, will clearly know what we're about and what this channel is about, and then they'll still try and eventually just act like they have the right to push something on us and change the whole way this channel works just because they want it to. And it's like, that's never how it is. It's like, folks are here watching this channel because they like who we are and what we do. They're not here on this channel. They shouldn't be here on this channel to try and eventually change who we are into something else. That's never, that's just not what we're going to be working this channel off of well into the future. It just isn't. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and hopefully the fires will end very soon. But still, a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Andrew, for that support also.
Hey.
He said, I've been researching AI and the likely possibility of its weaponization, dealing with certain concepts like instrumental convergence. And at this point, the cat is out of the bag. And what are your thoughts? And LOT, LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for the support. And AI really does have a good future in some categories. It's not going to be as revolutionary as people believe, in my opinion, but it will have applications. Like that, I'm not one of those people to say, oh, computers are fad. Like, no, this thing certainly has applications. It's just not going to be as widespread as people are making it out to be right now. Like, this will have AI will have applications in low-skill jobs and most likely in other kinds of problem-solving equations like that. But it will not really be seen as something that will take over every job, I believe, at least, because there still has to be some human intuition involved in a lot of higher skilled jobs that AI, I do not believe, will ever be able to truly replicate. And I don't really think that AI will ever exist in a way where it can naturally innovate. I just don't really think that's possible, because it's working from a computer apparatus, and AI at this point is working off of knowledge that has already been learned by people and then submitted into the internet, and then it learns that knowledge. It's not able to create new knowledge on its own yet. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. It certainly will have major applications, but it's not going to be something where it's like Terminator, where, they finds out that humans are the problem and starts killing everyone. It generally will just probably fill a lot of low-skilled job areas. And also, people don't have to worry about the thing revolting. Just to be honest, like, it doesn't have emotions. So it will not revolt because it doesn't feel disgust or contempt or anger. It just does its jobs. It does what it's requested. And as long as you don't give it emotions, it will never be able to revolt against anyone, because it will never feel the need to revolt. And most likely it will never be given the abilities to revolt either. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Phase YN, who puts in a 5 once again, and says, long live the LSA, and thank you for being a non-biased, Western-leaning, and realist, and competent newsbringer. And I think this might have been a duplicate one right here, but thank you very much, Phase, for that $5 support once again, and helping to keep us running. And also, we had a 5 from Michael Tripto, who said NATO needs to stick together. So I agree with that. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that it's a wonderful thing to know that folks are supporting this channel and wishing it well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Matthew, who puts in a 5. That's not me, that is Matthew, but thank you very much for that support. Also, big shout out to Jay and Teria78 for putting in a 5, along with Burnaby Alex, who also puts in a 5 as well. So thank you very much, Matthew, Jay and Teria, and Burnaby, once again, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank the three of y'all for the support. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but the support is greatly appreciated. Also, I think Burnaby Alex says something about Putin's oil storage of a certain kind that has to do with P. Diddy. And I guess Putin isn't waking up in the morning feeling like P. Diddy anymore. But still, thank you once again for all three of y'all for the support. I didn't throw in comments, but it's still greatly appreciated. And I thank you all once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing a reality. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one's here. Go to Kachulian343, who each put in a $5 donation. And thank you very much, Kachulian, for that support. The first one says, the fires in LA gave me a scary thought. As bad as it is now, how much worse could this have been if it was an act of coordinated arson by terrorists?
It would be a lot scarier if it is a coordinated arson attack that is occurring around the city. That would show us that there is a massive threat, that there's this unknown group of people roaming around and setting these fires. And as long as those people are out there, the fires are going to not only remain uncontrollable, they are going to spread at a unnatural rate or an unnatural pace. So really at that point, I think what would have to happen, because it would be impossible to find these people with pinpoint accuracy in a place like LA. What you would have to do is you would pretty much have to declare a state of emergency in the state of California, possibly impose curfews, and also strictly surveil anyone in the public. And if you see a group of people roaming around looking like they're up to no good, you would possibly have to just detain them without really any probable cause, which sounds unconstitutional, but I believe under emergency situations you can do that. I'm not entirely sure on the legalities of that. Matthew will probably be like, probably not, and I'll be honest, it probably isn't, but you might have to just try and detain people at random and then see if those are the people that may be the ones setting the arson fires. I mean, it's not exactly the best case scenario when we're talking from a law enforcement side of things, but it still is something that may have to be a necessity because of the state of emergency that the city is in. And if arsonists are the ones making these fires, they're running wildly out of control, and the situation is already uncontrollable, and it needs to be stopped from becoming even worse. So hopefully, if there are arsonists involved, which would make this incredibly scary, hopefully they will be able to catch them before they could do any further damage by implementing emergency measures in hopefully being able to catch them that way. But still, I hope that does address it the best I can. Thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Neil Vizanon, once again, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Neil, as well, for the support. He says, I've been the most politically minded person on earth since I was 8 years old. And if I can keep my mouth shut a few hours every night, everyone else can. And did you see my message about the Weather Channel? And I think I did. I think I did see your message about that, Neil. And thank you very much for the information once again. And also, good point, by the way. Also, I'm a political science major. I literally studied this stuff and lived in it for several years while I was in university. So I don't talk it. I keep it at bay, too. So, you know, if someone's trying to force it on you after the rule is literally no politics, that tells you that person is trying to basically tell you what to think, which is not a good way to be. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you for the support. I would completely agree with that. To be entirely honest, at a time, I was actually a very political person. And that was in high school, interesting enough, from about 9th to 12th grade. And then I graduated and I grew up. Like, that's honestly how I look at it. I grew up and I got tired of playing that goofy game. So that's really how I view it. But to be entirely honest, I think what was going on there in this particular instance was that this person was trying to seek attention because we already addressed this with him behind the scenes a couple of days ago, and he already had a crash out months ago about something else completely different. And you know, each time I don't really know what it was. Like, my general impression was that it was trying to get some attention from us or then attention from the audience, because I don't really know what the point of putting in a highly politically charged super chat was, knowing that would be removed. I mean, that was the natural move forward. That person knew that, because we've done that for a year and a half. They've been here for a year and a half. They put in a really political comment, it gets removed naturally like anyone would, and then they want to have a public crash out for everyone to see. I don't know, maybe to try and garner support or something like that. I don't know. But generally, I classify that as the actions of someone who may not be well. But with that, I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Kachulian343 once again, who puts in a 5 and says, This is a massive potential risk to national security, and LA isn't the only place where an act like this of arson could have massive consequences.
I certainly agree. It's a major national security issue, especially if we're seeing that all of these were created by arson, or even just half of them. The damage has been significant. The problem with that, though, is that it's very hard to deal with this kind of situation, because we would have to start greatly restricting civil rights for the large part, really for the entire citizenry, to be able to deal with this situation in any meaningful way. around the rest of the country. And then we start to move down that route of, are surrendering liberties worth securities? And I generally say that the answer to that is a resounding no, because I believe that it's just not a good thing to suspend civil rights and liberties for increased security. That generally ends up a very bad way down the road, because that is a double-edged sword. It might be good now, but it might be terrible later. So it's a tough one. It's a tough pickle, because I certainly agree with you there, but there's really no good way to deal with that without cracking down and removing civil rights and liberties. And that could end up becoming a horrendous scenario come around 10 years, 20 years maybe. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. A really tough egg to crack here that we got. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Burnaby Alex once again, who puts in a 5 and says, in Vancouver, we have special blue hydrants which can pull into seawater, and I hope we never need them.
And that's interesting, actually. I thank you for sharing that. I actually didn't know that those kinds of hydrants existed. One thing I generally do know about using seawater, and this is why a lot of people also don't know this, seawater has a high salinity content. Everyone knows that. It's salt water. But the problem with that is that when you combine a high salinity percentage with machinery, you start to get breakage a lot, or breakdowns a great deal, because that salinity can start to corrode machinery or even clog it when it's at high rates like it is in seawater. That's why generally you see that seawater is never used in really any applications without being desalinated first, which means that the salt's removed and it becomes fresh water. And that's why we may be seeing that the firefighters of LA are not using any kind of salt water or trying to access it, because while it would be good in the short term, in the long term it could be devastating, because a lot of these engines, because they would have to actually use pumping engines to, put pressure into that water to make it have pressure in the hose system, that could actually start to wear down those engines quickly. And so if the fire starts lasting a very long time, these engines may be completely put out of service because their internals are literally damaged beyond repair at that point because of the salinity of the salt water. So it would be good in the short term for smaller fires, but with the fires of these sizes, I don't even think they would want to use salt water because of the amount of corrosion and damage that would be caused to pumping engines trying to use it. But still, it's certainly something I think that they should look into, because at the very onset, when we're talking about small fires, like the beginning of the Palisades fire, that certainly would be helpful, especially if the electrical grid goes down and there's just not enough, I guess you could say, pressure in the system to be able to access the water in the hydrants. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support, because that is certainly something that could be worked with. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Kachulian343, who puts in a 5 and says, anyone who says fires are not dangerous is full of it, and my neighbor's home burned down with 5 kids inside. Goodness. From a sleepover, all less than 13 years old.
That's horrific. I hate to hear that happen. But fires are extremely dangerous. Fire is the greatest thing that's ever happened to humanity. It's also the greatest curse that's ever happened to humanity. It's equally beneficial and dangerous at the same time. Controlled fires are great. Uncontrolled fires are not. And that's terrible to hear that happened, because that's an absolute tragedy. There's no way to get about that any other way. But I still thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, I just saw Bobby Newman bring up a great point. He said the planes are using salt water. That's true. But the planes have tanks. The planes don't really have any mechanical machinery, at least advanced mechanical machinery like a water pump or anything like that, because they land the aircraft, and by using a skimming technique, by just skimming the float plane over the surface of the water, they're able to fill the tank. And of course, because of the rules or the laws of motion, because the plane's moving forward, the incoming water is continuing to push the water already in the tank back and fills it up. And then when they fly away and they go over the fire, they just open up the bottom of the tank, and gravity does its job, pulling the water out of the aircraft and down towards the fire. There's no advanced pump systems that are involved in that process. So it's fine for them to use seawater, because at the end of the entire operation, they can send that thing to an airport, get out a freshwater hose, and then just wash down the inside and give it a nice thorough cleaning, and there will be no corrosion. But when we're talking about a fire engine with an advanced pumping system that is very fragile and it really has to work with clean water, putting salt through that could be devastating, because that could start to tear up the internal machinery and completely render the fire truck unusable over a far shorter lifespan. And I believe that's why in the initial onset, we're talking about a desperate situation where, let's say, the fire is getting out of control. Yes, using salt water would probably be a great idea because we're not talking about a long-term fire where these engines would have to be in use for an incredibly long amount of time. But in a long-term fire scenario where, like we're looking at right now, I generally would assume that using salt water would be a bad idea because those engines would probably be put out of service a lot quicker than those using fresh water. As a matter of fact, they certainly would be put out of service a lot quicker because I believe a lot of the fire trucks the fire pumping engines are rated for, I believe, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to ask some of my firefighting folks if that's true or not. But still, with that, I hope that does address that well. Good point, though, about the planes using salt water. But that would be my counter, even if I'm wrong. I think that's the answer. But still, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to the new IKB 4472, who says, and also puts in a 5, by the way, and thank you very much for that. They said, if, and I do stress if, these fires are deemed to be the result of foreign actors, would Article 5 be invoked?
It depends on who they are where, because if they were a foreign actor from a country like, say, and I'm not saying that the Canadians are, terrorists by saying this, but if it was a country like Canada or the UK or France, we wouldn't really have any grounds to invoke Article 5. We would have to assume that this is just some lunatic, maybe radicalized by a group like ISIS. But if it's someone who has very direct connections to a foreign adversary like the Islamic Republic of Iran, this will certainly be justification to take strong action. Hell, there is also a possibility, some people have been saying this, that it may be a crime syndicate from the state of Mexico, well, from the nation of Mexico. And if that was the case, that'll probably give the United States some very considerable justifications to start conducting armed action against those crime syndicates inside of Mexico. Although I'm not really sure who would it even be at this point, and it could end up just being a lunatic. But generally, it depends on where they're from. Because if they're from an allied country, there will be no Article 5 invocation. If they're from a country like Iran, and they actually profess that they're connected to Iran, that will 100% be a justification to take hostile action against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, a big shout out to Blazat once again for throwing in that 3, along with FaZe YN for throwing in a 2, along with Ben Birch, who also threw in a 2, and also Amji's Labs, who threw in a 1. And huge shout out to Blazat, FaZe, Ben, and Amji once again for that support. No comments to address on those, though, so just huge thanks for that support. But with that, we're now moving on to our next super chat, and this one goes to JP Plays Games, who puts in a 2 and says, how's your day going, Enforcer Matt? And for me, it's going pretty decent. I will admit, I really hate to see viewers crashing out on us like that one did, because you hate to see people do that because, you like them to be on the channel, you enjoy them being here, and then one day they just crash out. So it's unfortunate, but rather than that, going pretty decent. I will say the fire news is not very uplifting to see, but rather than that, it's going as good as possible. So I hope your day is good as well, but thank you very much for the support. And our next one goes to Bruce Lee, who puts in a 2. It says, what? A crash out not involving your internet? LSA.
Yeah, it happens every once in a while, not often. But y'all get to see it live on air instead of it being off in some other place like a Twitter DM or something. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you once again for enjoying this channel and helping it to be possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And with that, we are now moving on because that was our last super chat. And once again, folks, huge thanks to you all for putting in that super chat support and helping to keep us running. I know we say that all the time, and I'm going to go through the spill one more time. That support really does keep us running, and it's that support exactly that keeps us on the air every single night and allows us to do this as a full-time job, to bring you the news through the short war videos and also the streams at night as well, and also the Twitter page, which takes up a lot of time also. So once again, huge shout out to everybody for that support. But we are now moving on to our Morse code decoders of the stream, and tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps for Royal Fluffiness, and Arabelle Garbo. They said the Morse code decipher says Ukraine is able to obliterate an entire company, and hopefully they can hold Kursk and LLT LSA and keep up the great work, guys.
And that is the sound of money, and y'all got that dent on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. And I got to congratulate y'all for getting that correct on this very day of the war, because y'all have continued to get that correct time and time again. And so I hope that does address that incredibly well. And we're actually on to another super chat before we get to the live chats.
All right, and this super chat goes to Halligan218, which put in a $10 donation. And they, of course, they are a longtime viewer as well. And thank you very much, Halligan, for supporting us yet again. And they said, whenever we would draft salt water out of the bay, we would always have to take the engine out of service when we got back for maintenance to fully flush out all the salt water and to prevent the damage.
Yeah, and Halligan 218, thank you for backing me up on that, and thank you for the support, because that's what I was talking about earlier. Is that with the amount of hours that these engines are in service right now, I don't even think there would be a time to put engines out of service and put them into maintenance, because I think pretty much the entire city of LA's fire departments have been mobilized and sent up into the northern areas to try and deal with these fires, and I don't think that any of them are really getting a lot of off time or being rotated out. So if they were using nothing but salt water, I don't even think there would be a cleaning period like that where you could take them offline. I don't even think there's a scenario right now where they could sacrifice fire trucks to be taken offline like that. So I think that would be kind of the issue right now, just like you're pointing out. There wouldn't be time to take these things out of service. And if so, that once again is hurting the long-term firefighting impact, because instead of having fire engines ready to go 24/7 that can be on the spot right now carrying crews around and other equipment, they're off in a fire department somewhere having to be flushed out and taken out of service. And so I may be mistaken, Halligan. It sounds like you actually have a lot of firefighting experience, but this may be bad for the long-term firefighting picture, because more fire trucks would be out of service if they were using salt water. I guess in the end, that would be better than nothing. I guess that's another way to look at that too, because right now, because of the lack of operating pumps, there isn't any pressure in the freshwater system, so maybe salt water would still be better, because it would be better than nothing. But at the same time, maybe worse, because if there was fresh water, if somehow the fresh water started to become available, then you can't use it because the fire trucks are out of service. It's an interesting kind of an equation. I don't really know how to work it, but I have a feeling you probably would know a little bit more than me in that category. But still, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to Purple Gerbil, also longtime channel legend. And I just saw their profile picture, by the way, and I remembered it. I remember I actually pointed that out quite a long time ago. That's actually a Purple Gerbil in the profile picture. I like that. And they put in a 10 Canadian, and they said, well, why don't they use sand to put out the fires in some areas? And LSA forever.
Great question, Purple Gerbil. Sand is usually a pretty big firefighting element in some previous fires in California. I think the problem is that they have not been able to find any usable sources of sand. I saw on Twitter earlier that someone said that you ought to get a load of sand and then spray it down with a little bit of water, and that'll stop the fire just right. And I was like, that is a great idea. Honestly, actually is a pretty good one. But where are they getting the sand? Like they could maybe get sand off the beaches, but do they have excavators and dump trucks and such things that could even get the sand? It's a big question. Can the city even requisition that kind of stuff? Or would they have to get into negotiations with the company to be able to do that? That could take time. Or it could be that they just don't have those resources. It could be that the National Guard or the Air Force is bringing in those kinds of resources. And also another thing may be the logistics of that. They may not have enough crew to be able to distribute the sand properly or be able to fight the fire that way. And also, would the winds, for that matter, you can lay out as much sand as you want, but if the winds take those embers, because they're fairly strong at night, I believe they're even strong right now, they will take the embers straight over that sand barrier or that fire trench and right over to the other side and start the fire there. So then the fire trenches and the sand walls are pretty much pointless because the fire will still jump right over them because of the winds. So I don't think, I think sand would be a great firefighting element if the winds died down. But I think right now, not even fire trenches could stop the situation, because the wind will just simply take the fire and then move it straight over whatever defensive barrier has been made. And also, like everyone is saying, sand is very, very heavy. I mean, it's wildly heavy. I mean, generally I believe the hoppers that carry sand on the railroads, which isn't really done much, but when they do, I think they have to use like the 2-bay hoppers that are fairly short because sand is that dense and heavy. I think they also do that for gravel too. They don't use the 110-foot hoppers. They use like I think it's like the 74-foot hoppers or 64-foot hoppers or something along those lines, because it's just that heavy. So it'd be very hard to transport that stuff too logistically, although a dump truck could easily deal with it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does answer that question well. Good point though, Purple Gerbil. And hopefully when the winds die down, they actually start to bring forward some of those firefighting techniques like fire trenches and sand, because I have a feeling that when the wind dies down, those will be the best thing as far as effectiveness, even better than water probably. But I'm not a firefighting expert, so maybe water is still better. But with that, I hope that does answer that the best I can. Thank you so much once again for support. And with that super chat, it's time for us to get into the live chats. Due to time constraints, we're going to answer 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so that question is going to go to, let's take a look here and see. This one will go to JR Interia, who says, when do you think the Russian economy will collapse?
Probably in about 2 years' time at a maximum. It's going to be somewhere in between now and 2 years' time. Once again, that's crystal balling. Take that with a grain of salt, but I feel like that would be a decent rough approximate considering the current economic situation we're seeing at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Mike Jones, who says, do you think the fires are arson started by Iran sleeper cells based on their post on the same day?
Oh, that's that's one that's been going around. It's a good question. I don't really know. It could be mere coincidence, really could be, or it could be deliberate. And so I'd have to say I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one because I don't want to preemptively say that the Iranians are responsible and blame the main on Spain and do that in the modern day. I don't want to do that, but it does seem like that's a very odd coincidence, and I think that you're also seeing what a lot of people are seeing because a lot of people have been bringing that up, that they said that and then this happened, and it's like, it's unspeakable horrors beyond comprehension. Sure as hell looks like it to me in LA, but, once again, could just be mere coincidence. So, who knows? I'd have to say I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one, though. But with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Witty. And Witty said, couldn't NATO intervene in Ukraine to enforce the Budapest Memorandum, and it would be a defense guarantee that we agreed to?
I would have to say that largely you couldn't. The Budapest Memorandum is something that would require at this point. Well, actually, technically, the best way to put it is that Ukraine is not in the NATO charter, so regardless of the memorandum, it doesn't affect NATO. It affects the United States and the United Kingdom individually. So if the United States and the United Kingdom wanted to enforce the Budapest Memorandum and then get involved, they would have to do that on their own without NATO, because the Budapest Memorandum was not a binding resolution to the entirety of the NATO alliance. It wasn't even a binding resolution to the United States or the United Kingdom. So it would be very hard to justify bringing the rest of NATO in off of the Budapest Memorandum, because the charter really just doesn't allow for that to be interpreted that way. Although you could certainly try and maybe succeed, it would be a very tough battle. It would be an uphill one to try and justify something like that. But with that, hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I got to thank you all once again for watching the stream tonight. Also, a big thanks to Hot So, who threw in a 12-euro super chat. Hey, and put in a little Shiba Inu saying thank you. And thank you, Hot So, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because every little piece of support counts. It helps to keep us on air and keep covering the news the same way we've been doing it for 1,051 days. And so with that, it is time for us to start rounding out this stream tonight and get ready for the next one tomorrow, and also the short war video. I've got to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for enjoying this channel and watching it tonight. We had 51,000 viewers over the course of the entire stream and about 7.8 thousand views. We are, of course, honored and incredibly appreciative to each and every one of y'all for watching. We thank y'all for picking this channel as your primary source of news, and of course, we put a lot of stock and faith into the Lee Spring Army, an amazing group of people who have continued time and time again to show that they stand for the American and Western interests around the world. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraine, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, like the Enforcer said, thank you all for another great stream tonight, and be sure to join us again tomorrow night for the next night of War News streams. And of course, I'm sure there'll be big news to cover tomorrow. So if there is big news to cover, you'll be hearing from either me or the Enforcer on the Short War video midday, once again to cover the breaking news. And of course, thank you all once again for another great stream to all 52,000 people that joined us before the stream ended. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
Straße,